Hello and welcome to the Howitzer and Buzz-saw Show. I am George, the Howitzer Gerbo.
And I am Mike, the Buzz-saw Asti.
Sports Talk back with you on deciding day in college football. As we now know, the 12 teams that make up the college football playoff for this year.
They need a name for the day, by the way. It's not Selection Sunday, but they need a name.
Yeah, we do need something.
Deciding day, you could argue, but it's not officially that. We need a name for it.
Yeah. Judgment Day, all the
for some
different crazy things. In college football, we'll talk about that. We'll talk a little bit of baseball news later in the program as well. Find us at Howitzer Buzz-saw on social media. Also, search Howitzer in your favorite podcast app to find us and download and listen there. Also, a shout out to Kellen B. Conley and the Hyphen Podcast Group, delivering great podcasts to the people whose music you hear right here each and every time on the HBS.
We bumped a champion to open up the Howitzer and Buzz-saw Show. We've been doing it for years. And, of course, to segue, we are going to have some teams that are going to vie for a championship and some others that maybe are upset they don't have the opportunity to do so. Of course, you can find George at Gerbo3, at Mike Asti 11 for myself, all through social media, at Howitzer Buzz-saw for the show handle, and everywhere you get your podcasts. So if you're not able to find it, then you're just not trying hard enough. And now on the tail end of Thanksgiving, still in the middle of the holiday season here, George's lights are all clear to be all up and all festive. And we now move into Christmas or whatever else you celebrate. Took the kids to Sarah's Candy for a shout out and a plug to them. They got the ice cream with the hard top, and now we are full-fledged into the holiday season here, and maybe not a holiday festive season, maybe not as joyous for some college programs as others. Is Judgment Day, I guess, would be the better term than Selection Sunday, because bubbles get popped in college basketball, but the college programs don't really fight back as much as the college programs here get left out, as we have some now taking the petty route, which I don't mind. It works for these shows.
One of those petty teams is Notre Dame, which is where we will start our discussion, as the 12 teams in the CFP have been selected. And again, I'll give, we'll get into what Hunter Yurchek, who took over this as the chair of this committee after Baylor's athletic director left in the middle, still undisclosed personal circumstance that he left Baylor and being the chair of this committee. But as he says each and every week that they do these from week 8 on, the committee's job is to rank the teams. It is their first job, is to rank them 1 through 25. Right. And Miami, Indiana, number 1 overall team consensus in the country, got all a unanimous AP number 1 here to end the season, and now number 1 going in the college football playoff, the only undefeated FBS team left at 13-0 after their excellent victory over Ohio State in the Big Ten championship, followed by Ohio State, Georgia, Texas Tech. Those 4 teams will have first-round buys this year, a new tweak after last year. Those buys were given to conference champions. Following them, Oregon, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, and Alabama. We get down to 10, 11, and 12. Miami, 10, Notre Dame, 11, BYU, 12. And you're saying, George, that sounds like they're in. Well, the committee is also, after it ranks those teams, it is then required to take the top 5 conference champions by ranking, which means that after Duke beat Virginia in overtime last night in Charlotte to end Virginia's chances, Virginia would have been in wouldn't have been ranked in the top 12, but would have been in as one of the top 5 ranked conference champions. Instead,
it was a play-in game for them.
Instead, Virginia still ends up being ranked at number 19 in the rankings, but the final 2, they're not a champion. So as we go down the line, we reach number 20, Tulane, at 11-2. They are in as champions of the American, and then we are down to James Madison at 12-1. Number 24 overall champions of the Sun Belt. And they both get the opportunity to go dancing in a scenario that the committee likely did not foresee when they initially made this this bracket and this setup when they said we're going to take a top 5 champion. We'll get into the merits of that and everything in a moment. There's a lot to break down and look at here. The main issue being the 10, 11, 12 teams that I mentioned, Mike, and everybody and their brother calling this out for the last 5 weeks, as Miami, of course, beat Notre Dame. Notre Dame had 2 losses this season, both by less than 4 points combined. They lost to Texas A&M and they lost to Miami. Both of those teams on the field. Notre Dame is not. Notre Dame did only have 1 ranked win the rest of the way down the season, but everybody seemed to feel that the quality of their losses, and because when they lost, and because they lost those games early in the season, made more of an.
And some brought up, Kirk Herbstreit, Greg McElroy, they brought up that if Notre Dame and Miami would play tomorrow, they both would pick Notre Dame to win and potentially win handily, even though they argue that Miami has to get maybe the nod because of the head-to-head. So that's where you get into the debate we've done for years on whether do you want the best or do you want deserving. And it appears this year they kind of lean more into who they felt was deserving versus who's really the best. But that gets into the crux of the simplicity of this, even though you could argue this season was more complicated than really any other. And last year we had the 12-team playoff, even though we had a debate, and what I wanted ended up happening where you end up just getting what you deserve, and you just rank the seeding on who's up there. Doesn't automatically have to earn you a top seed for winning a conference if it's lesser. That was fixed, and that was fine, and it didn't really ruin the playoff that much outside of Penn State having a little bit of a headache early on, having to go through one more game than I thought they should have. But SMU, for example, ended up still getting in when they didn't win the ACC title last year, in a very similar thing to Virginia, and they're often compared to what happened to Bama this year, where Bama also got in. Similar situation with SMU last year. They blew it, and they got in anyway because they had a resume that garnered it, but there also wasn't as much chaos behind them. It almost was, if you didn't put them still in, you would have had 4 loss teams that didn't really deserve it, that had horrible losses. And Alabama in that year had a worse resume than this year's Bama team, because this year's Bama team, despite losing the SEC title game, did beat that same team in Georgia earlier in the season. So you could argue they kind of split that. That wouldn't have been an argument last year. The arguments and debates that went on last year, that have gone on every single year of the playoff and have gone on throughout the BCS and every year of everything since we got away from just people voting and taking an AP poll and whatever selector, are even increased this year. I think it's pretty fair to say this is the most controversial and most debated, no matter which side you're on, field we've ever had. And we will see if that gets us to 16. We will see what that does to conference title games, because you could argue, and Bama still got in, but you could argue that they're getting delegitimized. I mean, we have a P4 conference champ that's not in, and I'm not saying I think Duke should get in, but that looks bad. If Bama wouldn't have got in, that would have really made it like they would have been better off not playing the game. They get in anyway. So we'll see where those go. And then we didn't even get to, and we'll get into a little later on what this does for the bowl season, because Notre Dame made it very, very clear that they should have been in the field in their eyes. And by not getting in, they don't even want to play a bowl game at all. And that's money for the school. They don't want it. They don't want the practices. They don't care, even because people were saying, what about the seniors? In a lot of these scenarios with coaches, etc., college basketball, when teams say, I don't want to go to the NIT, I know for a fact, I mean, we cover the sport, they poll the players. And oftentimes the players don't want to go. And if the players don't want to go, you can't force them. The Notre Dame example is unique. They basically, without saying this, pretty much were like, we don't care what the players or anybody wants. We're not doing it. We're not doing it because we're Notre Dame. So you get that. And where that's going to lead us to, if this is maybe the dissolution of bowl season in general, even though a lot of college programs maybe still enjoy it, or at least we whittle it down. So this is one of those playoff situations that maybe it's going to bring intrigue and maybe going to bring interest, but it's the most unique out of any field. And we have a controversy every freaking season. And if we get to 16, we're going to have controversy on teams 17 and 18. If we get to 24, we get to 36, we'll have controversy there, like in March Madness in basketball. But because you have 2 group of fives in, that feels like that's the extra wrinkle, and maybe it takes a rule away that you mentioned. Maybe that we just do the 12 best, because I guess I'll segue it back. one of the fixes, if you didn't have that rule in place, would be to say, look, we get the head-to-head. We get Notre Dame lost the game. We got to still put Bama in. We get the Texas, despite 3 losses. They have a lot of ranked wins, and obviously they have a really tough schedule, and they did play Ohio State. We don't want to de-incentivize playing tough out-of-conference games, which basically has been the case as programs around the country look to get rid of them, and we're getting to a point where none of them are really going to be played. Some conferences require 1 P4 out of conference. Big Ten, some schools don't play any, but that's going further in the wrong direction for some people. So that rule sucks. So now we'll just put the 12 best in, no group of 5s, maybe 1. And we'll throw Notre Dame a bone. We'll throw Texas a bone. I mean, if you didn't have that rule, maybe that's what they would do. But because of maybe even Vanderbilt. But because of this rule, you get 2 groups of 5. And because you have that, you end up with some teams with more difficult schedules getting left out with some quality wins on the board, despite also some rough losses. And it makes this a situation that I think is going to be debated all through the damn playoff. And even at the end of this, especially if one of these groups of 5 teams would somehow win this thing, which I don't foresee happening, but still, even if they win a game, maybe.
Yeah. No, as we look at Notre Dame, they had, in the committee's eyes, they'd been ranked ahead of Miami the entire time since the rankings had come out.
Right.
And the committee was throwing them in this lumped group with a bunch of teams that had winnowed to 3 teams leading into championship Saturday. BYU, who was 11.
Didn't even mention BYU, but right, yeah.
BYU, who was 11-1, but the way that the committee had grouped them, they had Miami and Notre Dame and BYU evaluating them all in a group. Well, suddenly BYU loses 34-7 in a game that they really weren't ever in. Against Texas Tech. They've only 2 losses this season are to Texas Tech when they were ranked 8 in the country, and now as they're ranked number 4 in the country. And BYU has 1 ranked win in the Holy War over Utah 24.
I was going to say their win quality is a little bit lesser than you could argue. Even Notre Dame, who had the USC win, but it's at minimum a debatable issue, and USC probably is a better win than Utah, who was in and out of the rankings all season long.
Yes.
And I mean, BYU is a very good team. I saw them play West Virginia, but they were playing a lot of the West Virginias of the world. The Big 12 schedule was a little easier for them this year. If you even look at how the Big 12 schedule leaned, which isn't their fault. We're not getting into the out of conference. That's just the Big 12 schedule. But if they had Miami's schedule or Notre Dame's schedule or Texas's schedule, certainly if they had Texas' schedule and played Ohio State, what would the result been? Even though the Big 12 is better than the ACC, they had an easier road within the conference. And yeah, they were kind of out of this conversation altogether, which is funny because, I mean, they were kind of better off before playing the Big 12 title game as well, even though they weren't really looking like they were going to get in. They would rather have 1 loss to Texas Tech than 2, but we have a world where you're not going to get much from the 3rd and 4th Power 4 conference.
Yeah, 3 of their league wins against sub 500 competition.
Right. Yeah.
And so once the committee and once Hunter Yurchek says on ESPN today after the reveal that after BYU lost, then now suddenly we are in a head-to-head evaluating Notre Dame and Miami solely against each other. Well, now the head-to-head win that each of them played on the field, because we have that result, now it comes into play because we're not lumping them in with 10 different people. And so they're asked after the fact, I think what Yurchek says, why are you even doing the weekly rankings then? I think, and Yurchek says what happens over the course of 5 or 6 weeks, we have the show that sets expectations, allow us to share a bit of a peek behind the curtain of how we're ranking teams from week to week. I don't think that having less calls is going to change that perception. So doing it less isn't going to change anybody's mind, but you're trying to, people take, as you know, Mike, people take these when these rankings come out as gospel, as the 10 commandments coming down from the mountain, at least for a snapshot of that week during the season. Right. And when you're the committee's viewing a team weeks like this, and then suddenly to the end when they don't play, and Yurchek was asked in previous weeks, hey, if somebody doesn't play, can they
Yeah,
can they be dropped? Yeah. So it's people. I think people are just looking for something that's standard, and we're not going to go back and rehash it. But you and I in 2014 had this exact issue and debate.
This is very similar to TCU and Baylor. This is literally TCU and Baylor, because even though you have Miami has the head-to-head win,
Big 12 didn't have a title game, so you kind of had to rank the things head-to-head, and
they share it on the history book.
They share it. And then both of them didn't make it. So
and that's also an example, because people brought up even this year with the ACC that maybe they should just put Miami in the game to play Virginia and tell Duke to get the hell out and change the rule. And they didn't do it. That would have set a bad precedent. But here's the difference, though. You bring up the Big 12 10 years ago. The Big 12 did change their rule mid-season. They had a debate. They had shows like this, and they answered it by basically, it almost seems like they tried to capitulate to what the ACC did not. The ACC stuck to their guns, even though it sucked to have Duke there, and they won, and Virginia screwed it all up, basically. Virginia would have been less debatable if they would have won. And for a little aside, George, and I even texted this to somebody, Virginia kind of screwed up what should have been their best season maybe ever. They should have won this ACC. They were probably the best team in the conference. You can argue with Miami, but Miami messed up against Louisville and other teams. And now, with James Franklin at Virginia Tech, they've been able to benefit by getting some of those recruits that Virginia Tech was just swinging and missing on within the state, because that's a recruiting hotbed. Franklin's not going to miss on those anymore. They missed their year. Maybe next year they'll still be good. They have eligibility left with some of those kids, but that sucks not getting it done this year. But separate from that, the ACC stuck to their guns. So, hey, they're fine. The Big 12 back then, they did change, and Baylor and TCU share the title, but that was a similar scenario to this, where you have one leading on the head-to-head back from our old debate, and the other one, like Notre Dame here, had better quality losses, I guess you could say. Notre Dame's quality losses, as you mentioned earlier, they lost to two CFP teams in close games. They could easily have won them, and then they'd be the number one team in the country, probably even ahead of Indiana because they're Notre Dame, yet they lose them and they're out of the playoff altogether. They are an independent. They don't have a title game to play, so that ends up hurting them this year. Whereas last year, if you remember, George, last year it actually benefited them, where they got in the CFP because they didn't play and couldn't screw it up, and they go all the way to the championship game. So do they need in a conference is the whole thing of this year. You could argue last year they didn't need in the conference. It benefited them to not be there. But, yeah, and I think the only thing, though, that I will add, we've talked about this forever. And I don't think fans still understand it. That I've been advocating to have less weeks of a reveal, and even though you want a barometer for the CFP, I get that. They want it. They want conversation ratings. I think it does confuse people. I've even argued against the AP poll, and some say, well, let's just use the AP poll to rank these teams. I've argued against the preseason poll. But if you're going to have those, and you're even going to have all the weeks of the CFP reveal for TV, that's fine. But what people need to understand, and we've been saying this for a long time, it is all week to week. It is all week to week. So as you were laying out that, okay, why is this now different for BYU? Why is now the head-to-head in play, even though normally I would like that? Why is that in play when before it was not in play? The answer they would give if they were on this show, it is week to week. Do not take it as gospel in week 10, in week 11, yesterday, the week before the conference title game.
Yesterday.
Do not take it. George, they literally say,
stop. It really is. Yeah. Literally yesterday they were in. Yeah.
But the thing is, though, you have to, the only thing I will give them credit, and I think, they messed up some things this year, but you have to give them credit. This is the one thing they're not confusing you on. People say the committee is confusing. They say, literally, do not take us seriously until Judgment Day Sunday, Selection Sunday, whatever the hell you want to call it. And what do people do? They take them seriously prior to the Sunday. They tell you, they basically, George, here's what they should do an extra mile to really hammer it home for society. They might as well say the whole thing's a charade until the Sunday after the title games. Because it is. It's just for TV. It's just for ratings. And if they didn't care about any of that and all this conversation on social media and all these shows, then they probably, by rights, if you want to be fair for the society to not get confused, do a show after the regular season, do another one maybe, maybe before or after championship game, just for a conversation, even though there's not much that'll be different in the rankings. And then you have this one. If you got to have more, do one, before the second to last game of the season. But you don't need this many. But they make it clear. Stop worrying about, because that even happened 10 years ago. Baylor and TCU, forget the Big 12 sharing the title. If you remember, they had a flip-flop in the last week of the season. I remember your argument all the time was at that point, and that was before they really released what they were thinking. Well, okay, yeah, I can hear that the resume is not as good for having worse overall losses. West Virginia got involved heavily in that debate, but they had this team ranked ahead of this team yesterday. Well, they're saying that doesn't matter. Don't take it seriously anymore. Now we're 10 years into this damn thing. People still are. So because they say all of that, that can be some defense for them, even though it confuses people because of the rankings being the way they are and having a flip-flop, even going to yesterday to then today, as we're recording live the night after the announcement. I will say, George, I normally do prefer, for my thoughts here, I normally do prefer taking head-to-head into account. Mm-hmm. What I want to make clear to fans, and you know this, but I want to make this clear to fans, especially as someone, I'm not even trying to be arrogant here, as an historian of the sport and who, has claimed championships and a whole debate. I'm freaking in a meeting coming up with a program debating on one from a long time ago. Head-to-head has not always been taken into account. So people banging the drum on let's take head-to-head and live off head-to-head and head-to-head is the end-all be-all, especially if records are the same. That has not been the doctrine of the sport. I think maybe it should, but that has not been the doctrine of the sport. So to argue head-to-head how could anyone in their wildest dreams not go to head-to-head? George, there are title claims in history. I mean, go back to 1934 if you want to look that one up. Pitt and Minnesota both claim to share the championship. Minnesota went undefeated. Pitt has one loss. Guess who Pitt lost to? Minnesota. Head-to-head. Now, it's NCAA doesn't give it to them. They can put whatever they want on their Twitter bio. It's not really legit. But they're arguing against the head-to-head result. We've done that forever. So you go now, and I'd like to take head-to-head if you have everything else equal, but it's not always been that way. But separate from what the committee releases and the confusion of week to week, if you got a tie-breaking scenario and records are the same, I'm not going to throw a chair for taking head-to-head into account, even though it was a close game in the beginning of the season. I do like looking at overall body of work. I do like looking at the whole season, not just the final weeks of the year. People used to complain when they only looked at the final weeks. Okay, you want to go head-to-head? Fine. I do think Notre Dame would be better now if they would play tomorrow, and they'd probably beat Miami if they played tomorrow. But, hey, they lost on the field, and Miami does have worse overall losses. Louisville, they have worse overall losses. Louisville, an average team. Texas A&M and Miami are both CFP teams, but still, they played on the field and Notre Dame lost. So I'm not going to necessarily cry for the Fighting Irish because of that. And yeah, they maybe would have been better off playing a title game this year, but they just don't want to be in a conference. They were able to be fine last year not being in a conference. They're not going to be in a conference. They can make the money without it. That's a whole moot point as well. So that's all fine. I will also defend, I don't know your thoughts here. I will defend Alabama getting in. I understand they got boat raced to Georgia, and I understand that looks really, really bad, and I understand BYU got booted out when they lose a title game when they got blown out, so why would Bama still get in? The unique difference here is, and you mentioned it, and this is the simplest way, BYU got blown out to Texas Tech, and that's their second loss of the year to Texas Tech. Mm-hmm. In the Big 12, there's no debate. The best team of the year, they paid the most money, they had the best roster, Texas Tech. And you could argue maybe the best season in their program history because they usually have squandered these opportunities for many, many years. This is their first conference title, even of this century. And they deserve it. And they beat them twice, so there's no debate. And BYU only has really one quality win. They took advantage of some others. So they're out, and they're not even really complaining. But Bama split with Georgia. They did beat Georgia, even though it was a close game by a field goal. So if we're taking here's the thing, George, if we are taking the full season into account and we're going to look at Miami beating Notre Dame head-to-head way back in the beginning of the year in a close game as well, then we got to look at the fact that Bama beat Georgia, even though if they played tomorrow and the next day and the next day after that, I think you and I both would pick Georgia to keep on winning. Based on resume, they split. So to be fair, based on resume, they have the quality win over Georgia. It's a great win. They did split those. You got to put them in. And if you didn't put them in, you would set the precedent that playing in the title game would be a negative, and then you'd have teams, the SEC has power, Bama has power, not even wanting to do them at all because they were in before that. So why would that boot them when they face the CFP team? So I don't have a problem even with Bama being in, and I'll give it back to you because I think you know my biggest problem and how we're here. My biggest problem, before I fully get more into it with maybe a rant, is you have 2 group of 5 teams in there with strength of schedules that do not deserve it, with bad losses, with a combined 4 Power 4 games played in general, in which they didn't even go 4-0 combined, and they didn't play anybody of note in their title games. I mean, you have a loss to Ole Miss head-to-head that we're gonna see. Who wants to see that? Despite the Lane Kiffin thing, who wants to see that? The team Ole Miss is better on the field, and just off deserving, I don't think they deserve to be there. You want to go 1, sure. 2 is ludicrous, but do you have a problem with taking the head-to-head on a tiebreaker? Do you have a problem with Bama still being in despite losing the title game? And then I'm now characterized around the country, even when I go down to UCF and cover the games, as this group of 5 hater. You don't have that tag. Do you have a problem with 2 group of 5 teams being in? Because I do.
Yeah, I think both Vanderbilt and Texas are better teams than Alabama, but
sure,
the conference litigated it in a proper way with proper tie-breaking procedures, and those teams weren't the extra data point. The 4 contenders for the SEC title game, Alabama, Georgia, and then obviously A&M and Ole Miss. A&M losing when it did. I think A&M is the 5th best team in the country, right behind Texas Tech.
You could have argued before Indiana really fully got undefeated, and when they were still like in the middle of the year, that Texas A&M should have been the number 1 team in the country, or 2. Yeah. I think there was a point because Indiana and Ohio State were 1-2 most of the year. You could have argued that the Texas A&M for a while before they lost, when they were all undefeated, should have been 1. If you look at the overall schedule at that point, and obviously Indiana then beat Oregon, and they deserve it. But there was a while where I think A&M is arguably underrated this year. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think Vanderbilt got a little bit of the Texas. You can't defend them losing to Florida. That's probably the worst loss of any of those teams in there, and that was repeated.
Florida State would be, you could argue. For
losing to Florida. Yeah, but specifically Texas's loss to Florida was counted it because Texas.
No. They're both bad, but that would be a counter argument, is that Florida State equally as bad, I guess.
Vanderbilt, I don't think got Vanderbilt. I think they've got maybe not an argument just because there were so few. Because again, blame the ACC for mucking all this stuff up with getting 2 G5 teams in here because of their own bylaws and rules. Vanderbilt, in my mind, played well enough all season to beat a playoff team, and then the committee, by its own word, by your
with a Heisman candidate too,
by your check's own description, that that Vanderbilt whipped Tennessee so bad that it caused Tennessee to fall out of the rankings, and that no longer was a good win.
Which is ludicrous.
but Alabama beat Tennessee, and it was a good win for Alabama.
Right. I mean, that's just ludicrous. I mean, you could argue whether Tennessee has been overrated or not. I mean, in all honesty, George, if I was going to evaluate, I do think Tennessee was a little bit overrated most of this year, but you shouldn't be penalizing the team that shellacked them.
They both beat a ranked team, and it was worse for Vanderbilt. Yeah. Somehow.
The only thing I could see is if, for example, and this is a hypothetical, if Vanderbilt would have crawled through the game and barely beat Tennessee, then you could say, if we think they're overrated, you should have done more. If we're looking to really argue here of equal teams, they didn't do that. They went in there and slapped them around. So, that is an insane argument. The only thing I want to argue here, though, is because if you're ranking the teams, I would imagine here, I guess, in terms of teams that got left out, and maybe we'll just look at SEC here for the purpose of this, you believe Vanderbilt got screwed more than Texas. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Just the two of them. Yeah,
great win by Texas, but 3 losses is a lot, and obviously Bama has 3 losses. But this goes back to it really is when you lose. But
Bama's 2. They have one of the losses.
Texas's loss more indefensible for most than Bama's, because at least at the time that Bama played Florida State,
at the time it was right. At the time
we didn't know now we know. So
I mean
But when Texas played Florida, we knew Florida was not good and firing their coach and all that other type of stuff. So that's kind of like where. So yeah, but yeah, as you go down.
Well, then my counter to that though, because I hear that, and it's
give
not
you a snapshot just for the numbers. Texas was number 13, so Texas was right out of that 12 cut line. And again, of course, the group of 5 teams. Texas 9-3. Texas buoyed by that win against A&M, ahead of Vanderbilt at 10-2, number 14, ahead of Utah 10-2 at number 15, and then Southern California at number 16. So that gives you an idea of the way that the committee viewed Texas as a better team than 2-loss Vanderbilt and 2-loss Utah.
And here's the thing. I get the argument for Vanderbilt. I do. And obviously the Tennessee argument that somebody would say publicly is asinine, to get that word here into one of our final shows of 2025. Just an asinine comment. However, George, for the purpose of this show, the counter argument to defend Texas as even being the 13th team, to be ahead of Vanderbilt, to be in this conversation, and even for the people that would argue they should have been in the playoff field if you don't have to have a rule and don't worry about the group of 5 teams, because that was all obviously out there a lot amongst a very rabid Texas fan base, certainly all over social media, is, and we get the rankings are week to week here, but do you feel they would be in if they never played Ohio State and played just anybody in the world? Anybody, it's a guarantee win, doesn't matter who. They could have played Maryland, West Virginia that we covered. Obviously, they're Power 4, but they're bad. They could have played Group of 5. They could have played FCS. They could have played the Howitzer and Buzz-saw team. Doesn't matter. If Texas played anybody else under the sun and they had 10 wins and were 10-2, and obviously they would have, assuming that would be a win, they would be in with everything else remaining the same, and you don't have to worry about stupid rules of group of 5, hypothetically, in this. Would they be in? And the reason why, if you answer yes, is you're shaking your head, and I think everybody under the sun would think they would be yes, just obviously also for their brand name. They moved them ahead of Vanderbilt just for the purpose of this. They probably just wanted to say, hey, that's a blue blood, you're Vanderbilt.
It's not that playing Ohio State penalizes them, but that
that's my argument. That's my argument, though, is I think this does, and it's not. We've done the show before. We don't have to fully get into it here. I do believe that the argument of why teams should no longer stack the out-of-conference schedule that I've been saying while I covered West Virginia because they were doing the schedule dumb for years on end, and you cover a program that was ahead of that curve, even though it annoys me, and not playing any Power 4s out of conference, is this example. If Texas did not play Ohio State and had an out-of-conference schedule that was Penn State's, Maryland's, anybody else, even West Virginia's this year with only one Power 4, but it was a much easier opponent than, say, Ohio State. If they had anybody else in there besides Ohio State, because they just had a brutal out-of-conference game. They wanted to test themselves. That's out of conference, though. No matter whether they were in the Big 12 SEC, it was not going to be a conference game. If they had anyone else on that thing, Indiana has nobody. They have no Power 4s and out of conference. Now, obviously, they have legit wins and deserve number 1. They beat Oregon. They beat Ohio State. I'm not arguing them. But out of conference, 0 Power 4s. Circusnetti likes to bring this up and act like they're playing a tougher schedule than SEC teams. He's borderline gaslighting you, even though he's a great coach, and it's cool to have a guy from West Virginia doing this. But if Texas took the Circusnetti doctrine and put it on their schedule or the Penn State schedule, you and I both know they'd be in this playoff,
especially because their league is tough enough, right?
Well, that's the whole argument that I've said many times. The reason why you could argue that a program like West Virginia in the Big 12 maybe should schedule at least one Power 4, which they're doing next year, but they're not doing in 2027. They have no Power 4s in that schedule. The reason why you could argue they should have at least one is because of what we're seeing. The Big 12 is not respected enough. The conference champ gets in, but if they have a 10-win season, George, this would even happen to Rich Rod. They'd end up with a 10-win year on a pretty easy schedule. They'd not win the Big 12 title, and they would get left out as team 13 or 14 because they would say you didn't have enough quality wins. So maybe you add another Power 4 in there. But Texas is in the SEC. They have enough of them. They have ranked teams in there. They could have the little sisters of the poor every week in out of conference play, and they're going to have 3 to 4 ranked opponents every year within conference play. This is why I always hate the group of 5 fans that say, well, look at the out of conference schedules. They're trying to get easier over the world, and some aren't even playing any Power 4s. Okay, we can argue about that. Maybe that's not nice, but In conference play, they have enough of them, and they're quality opponents. Group of 5 teams play 1 or 2 a year, and that's max. Their schedules are not as hard. So if Texas did not have the game against Ohio State, they'd be in. And I guess my only defense of them, even though they've also messed it up themselves with the really bad loss to Florida, is that not a bad precedent? And because we've already seen people, Kirk Herbstreit for one, speak out publicly and say he does not like how there's no power forwards in some out-of-conference schedules, and the out-of-conference schedules are making this horrible for fans. And, even you talked about it as a reporter, you don't like covering those early season games. Well, if that's your opinion, don't screw Texas for playing Ohio State then. They should then still put them in. I mean, there are people that believe they're exhibition games and out-of-conference play in this era. If that's your belief, correct me if I'm wrong, did they not hold playing Ohio State against them? I know that not literally speaking, but it really looks like they did.
And only a 7-point loss, 14-7. So
to the defending champion that just lost to the number 1 team in the country. And let's be honest, if they would have kicked the field goal, they'd be in overtime in week 1. And honestly, George, Cignetti in Indiana deserves the number 1 spot. But if that field goal goes through and we go to overtime, Ohio State could easily have won. So he even joked on the Fox broadcast they got lucky. They did. Ohio State probably thinks in their heart and if you look at the path, by the way, they could easily win the CFP base. They got an easier road, arguably. But the point of it is that is an out-of-conference game that is a behemoth that no one would deny that's not hard. They didn't move down in rankings, if you remember at the time. The AP poll basically still kept them right near each other. It was almost like it was an exhibition for fun. Let's watch this. The loser, people were saying at the time, don't hold it against them. What happened? It got held against them. And you could blame and say, well, if you don't lose to Florida, you're in anyway. And that's totally true. And it's on them. And I get it. But we are also still holding it against them that they were willing to have the balls to play a tough out-of-conference game. So whenever anybody, because we saw this, immediately after that occurred, Alabama, they threw Marshall on the freaking schedule. It was going to be West Virginia. We've seen Texas already bump off teams. We saw Indiana bump off a Virginia matchup months ago within this season. We're seeing teams do that, and I don't love it, but why? They want to avoid this. The risk of playing those games is just not worth the reward. If Texas would have beat Ohio State and they still had the Florida loss, yes, they'd be in, but they wouldn't move that much in the rankings, certainly not in that week. But by losing, they're out altogether. It's not worth the risk. And I do think it does set the precedent that they are scheduling tough out-of-conference games against certain teams so they don't complain if nobody schedules them moving forward, which is what we're getting into. That's all I'm saying, that was proven a little bit by what happened to Texas. And I don't think they can cry too much because of the Florida loss. But if hypothetically, if there was a 16-team playoff and they want to argue seed line and people said Vanderbilt, I then would say, yeah, I get the records, but Texas played Ohio State. Like, let's not hold it against them. Let them be the 13th seeded team, for example. So that needs to be thrown out there. But otherwise, the issue is the group of 5 teams. So say the rule did not exist, and because Duke had the 5 losses, they were obviously never going to be a CFP team if they won, and Virginia losing ruined it all. And if Virginia would have won, one of those group of 5 teams would have been left out. But do you think this now means to take the rule away of worrying about conference champs because you have 2 group of 5 teams that just nobody can argue the strength of schedules were not even close to Texas, Vanderbilt, Bama, Notre Dame, Miami, even Notre Dame with an independent schedule. They played USC, that's tougher than anybody these teams played, and they both get in. And we have not only blue bloods, but Vanderbilt with the Heisman candidate gets left out. Vanderbilt probably deserves it more than those teams.
Yeah, the rule will be revisited for sure in the offseason. That when they crafted this, they did not imagine
2 group of 5 teams. No way. They thought maybe one, but not
that
2.
When we just said the loose regulation of, hey, the highest 5 ranked conference championship team, which is the conference champions, which is the language.
They thought it'd be the Power 4, and then maybe 1 group of 5 who had an undefeated year that was special, like a Cincinnati. Because when Cincinnati got in the 4-team playoff, as much as I hate group of 5s, I even said they deserve it. If you give me credit, you remember that, because they beat Notre Dame. That was a deserving opportunity. UCF didn't have that win when they missed out back in 2017. They thought those would be the rare examples. They get in doomsday with 2 of them who really barely.
Yeah.
Who I mean, you could argue Duke should be ranked ahead of these teams based on just beating Virginia alone. If you want to really argue a ranking,
No,
I'm not going
to Duke's losses are so bad.
I'm not. As I said, I'm not going to really spend too much time arguing for them. But they also had a harder schedule. Look at what Manny Diaz said. They played all these Power 4 teams.
Yeah,
these other teams did not.
Everyone kind of knew even before they played that game, unless
Sure, but their schedule was tougher than James Madison's and Tulane's. Period.
Sure.
But I'm not arguing for them to be in the playoff. I'm just saying that the teams that got booted out of the playoff for James Madison and Tulane, it's not Duke. It is Texas. It is Vanderbilt. It is Notre Dame. Notre Dame should be in at least head of one of those teams if you want to be fair.
Yeah. And so the stipulation, I'm okay with preserving the lone spot for one of those teams. So that's somebody from the American, somebody from the Sun Belt, somebody from the MAC, God forbid, like any of those leagues. The new Pac-10/12 when it becomes reconstituted
oh, Lord.
next year with all of the states, as I called all of the states and Gonzaga. That's the new Pac-12 conference. So
as coaches still run the hell out of there, though. So that shows you what they.
Yeah, I'm okay with reserving the one spot, but yeah, you just have to. And we need it needs to be said that the ACC and their goofy only 2-level tie-breaking rules between the 5 teams for that second spot, Georgia Tech, Miami, Pitt, Southern Methodist, and Duke were all finished with 5 and 2 or 2 losses in conference.
Yeah.
And out of that, because they did not have a good way to break it down and nobody's played round whatever, Duke is somehow the winner. I still don't understand how, but they are.
Well, part of it was strength of schedule, though. Part of that was strength. Like literally speaking, that was how they got in the game. So I'm not necessarily saying they deserve a CFP, but the fact that what Manny Diaz literally said that we play, because if you look at their losses, Pitt lost some bad games, and they also did some of their wins. They didn't play anybody. They have wins against Stanford, North Carolina State. They don't have any wins really to hang their hat on besides the Georgia Tech win. And by the way, George, if Georgia Tech would have just beat Pitt's ass, we wouldn't probably have this mess either.
Yeah,
because Georgia Tech and Virginia were the 2 best teams.
Georgia Tech deserved better. Yeah.
Well, they lost. I mean, they deserve better, but they freaking lost to Pitt. And I watched that whole game.
Yeah,
if they played like trash. They did.
Yeah.
I know King played bad. They played bad.
Yeah,
and then Pitt, I think, is overrated, but they played bad. I watched the whole damn game. And we saw what Pitt was against Notre Dame, and we saw Pitt against Miami. Georgia Tech, to me, if they play tomorrow, would probably beat Pitt. But that day, they didn't get it done. So, that's the rule. Here's what I want to add and see if you think this is the fairest way. And I know it's hard to regulate because it's not NCAA bylaw. It's the conferences in and of themselves. Granted, the CFP takes them all into consideration. Would you prefer, if you get into a tie-breaking scenario for the conference title game, not even just CFP, but whoever plays in the conference title game, to just then go to the highest ranked team? Or does that get too much opinion for you? Because some people have brought that up, that if you do the highest ranked team, then you're getting into Miami would have been in that game. And then Miami would have.
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that being a factor. Maybe not like the first factor, but if we've gone, hey, nobody, because the leagues are so big now.
Aside from head-to-head, head-to-head got to be in there too.
Yeah, and head-to-head goes out the window when we got like 4 or 5, right?
That's what I mean. That's what I'm saying. When you get to 4 or 5, this exact scenario, if they did this exact scenario, and you go to highest ranked when you're getting away from head-to-head, and you have 4 or 5 teams, that would have went. Miami would have been in then.
It's in a big 16 to 18 team league. It's unlikely that 4 or 5 teams are going to have any common opponents, right? So hey, Pitt beat Georgia Tech, but Miami didn't,
they lost to Miami. Pitt beat Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech, but lost to Miami.
They all don't have common, in the same way the NFL does, right? It's conference record. Okay.
Pitt and SMU didn't play.
And it's common opponents to, all these different things, strength of so yeah, strength of victory in conference games. I'd put that in there, and I'd be willing to have, actual ranking because the ranking signifies that the caliber of the team, what it's been all season.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. The only issue is that it does get into. I mean, let's be honest. Some people are
better plan. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I would be fine with it, and it would have fixed this year. But let's be honest again, and neither one of us are AP voters, despite covering college football. There are some AP voters that I've seen them take hours on end, and they're great voters. There are some AP voters that have publicly admitted they don't care about this, and they really don't do anything. So the only issue is
we would base it off of the CF. It would be based off the playoff ranking. Yeah.
Sure. No. I don't know if that's better. Let me.
Yeah,
What I'm saying
exactly.
is where I was going to go with this, because I've seen, like, for example, like Dave Portnoy is talking about how it should be the AP, and other people are saying the CFP, and it would literally be the CFP. But what I'm saying is, no matter what, the issue with doing that, and the only defense of Duke being there, you're getting into, whether they're intelligent or not, you're getting into an opinion. People have not liked the history of the sport, which is why there's literally meetings about correcting some claims on the fact that for 100 and plus years, it was literally off just people's opinion. It was not on the field. It was opinion. So now we're arguing that we got to get into a tie-breaking scenario, which is just off opinion. So I again, it would have fixed this year, and Miami clearly deserved to be there more than Duke, even though Duke won. So give them credit. They can hang a banner. They're not a CFP team. But it does make me feel a little uncomfortable to be a leader of let's fix the past because opinions were wrong, to now say, let's go to opinions again. You get what I'm saying? I mean, I'm not saying all the AP voters are bad, but there are opinions in there. And you cannot in any way separate between and say, okay, we're going to do a tie-breaking scenario with only half the AP voters because these other people are idiots. You can't do that either. Like, you give the vote, you get the vote, or the CFP as well with who's in the committee. So there's never going to be a year where this is fully fixed, that no one complains. If we get to 16 teams, the 17th team is going to complain 100%. But what I think is something that we can unanimously agree on here, and I know around the country will not, because there are some that just want to argue for their school, and they're mostly Group of Five fans, and I get it. And sometimes people are sick of the same teams being there. But George, even if that's what you're sick of, Indiana, they were there last year, but they haven't been a Big Ten champ in forever. They haven't been a conference champ in forever. I mean, Duke did win a conference title for the first time in forever. Vanderbilt's good and has a Heisman candidate for the first time in forever. It's still different this year. It's not the same old teams. SMU was in there last year. So you even have some differences, and you would have that every year. But two freaking Group of Five teams in the CFP, when they play definitively easier schedules with very few Power Fours on those schedules, one or two in most years max, and this year includes losing the Power Four game, that's a non-starter for me. I get the rule that they were pigeonholed this year because of what happened with Duke and different things that went down. They could defend it that way. I'm sorry. That is asinine. That needs change. And I know I can compromise and let it have the one slot. I would prefer it not even to have the one slot. If you want Mike Asti to run this thing, I would do it where, okay,
if you want to be considered, play a schedule that's tough enough, win those games like a Boise State, and get in the top 12 on merit, as opposed to.
I will argue I will argue to no end that despite being characterized as Group of Five hater, you can attest that I argued for Cincinnati when they got in that year. Why? They had the Notre Dame victory. Yes. They had a quality win that other programs did not. When UCF was left out and they have their fake claim, their best wins that year were against an average Pitt team and Memphis twice. They played no one. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be a pro SEC guy or a pro Big Ten guy. Cover the freaking Big 12 that gets screwed left and right. I'm saying you just got to look at these schedules. These aren't even close. Texas played Ohio State in out-of-conference play and then plays in the SEC with 4 or 5 ranked teams every freaking year, and they get left out of the CFP, and James Madison and Tulane are in. Tulane already having the loss to Ole Miss, and James Madison dropping an egg to Louisville that I watched at a bar in Pittsburgh after my high school reunion, and everybody in there were laughing at that result. Come on. And they were a CFP team? If Louisville and SMU and JMU played again tomorrow, you guarantee JMU winning that game by 20 points? A CFP team should. I mean,
North Texas, who lost to Tulane, is a better team.
They're fighting Neil Brown to let Neil Brown coach that thing.
And JMU, and Navy may be a better team than
you could argue if you want to, but I mean, I'll tell you this: whether you want to argue those or not, if Texas and JMU played tomorrow, who you betting on? Texas would destroy him. If Bama played tomorrow, who you betting on? If Notre Dame played tomorrow, who you betting on?
To keep up
with Tulane, come on.
To keep up for the American, like the American is a good league, and
I'm not saying it's a bad league or they're bad teams.
No, but then because of this, I blame the ACC. I blame Florida State, Clemson.
Sure, but you could argue that last year you could blame the Big 12. I mean, this
Virginia,
does work.
everybody in there, that two of these teams got in. Yeah,
right.
The Sun Belt overall is not a good league. The American is a good enough league from time to time. And here we are.
The Sun Belt is ludicrous. The Sun Belt, if you got to pick one of them, the Sun Belt champ is ludicrous. The MAC champ would be ludicrous, 100%. I mean, yes, those results are ludicrous. Those conferences are ludicrous. The American, you could argue, but no, 2 group of 5 teams is utter madness. And George, I would simply, I'm not somebody that just wants to go best and do the whole thing where let's not even play the games. Let's just, pick all the blue bloods and, look at the rosters. I'm not that guy. I want to go deserving on who's earned it on the field. I can be fine looking at head to head. I want to look at strength of schedule. I want to look at overall body of work from week 1 or week 0 all the way to the end. All that got to count. And you shouldn't be penalized for playing a conference title game. I'm with all of that. If you do all of that and you don't have any of these stupid rules, there's no way you're taking 2 group of 5s. And George, I would push back and argue that if you do all of that with no rules, you may come out of there with no group of 5s. Because if we're splitting hairs between Vanderbilt and Texas, I mean, if you want to do the 12 best teams here, what you probably should be doing is take both group of 5s out, put Notre Dame in, and then debate Vanderbilt and Texas. That's what we should be doing if you really want the 12 teams that are most deserving off the strength of schedule and what they performed. We're not doing that because we had to capitulate to at least one group of 5, and then obviously the ACC screwed it up, and Miami shouldn't have lost to freaking Louisville, and they would have had that fixed. But to have James Madison there as well, who's barely ranked. I mean, and I'm going to make this clear too as we maybe move on and talk, what's happened with the coaches and then the rest of the sports world right now. I know, and that if Tulane or JMU somehow either wins or even plays a freaking close game and beats the spread in these first round matches, people are going to say they legitimize their spot. I will stand on business because I'm not a hypocrite and say they still didn't deserve to be there. I get that it'll make them happy and they can argue that they maybe vindicated themselves in some way on the field. Sure. You got to look at what happened during the season, who they played, when they played, how you put those schedules together, and then who's really deserving. They shouldn't have been there. And as you mentioned, they could argue it's tough to put those schedules together. They want to play more power forwards, but it's hard to do so, etc. I know for a fact that some of the group of 5 teams that are normally in this conversation, they don't make it easy to play these power fours at all. It's not always on the power 4 for not having these games played. For example, before UCF was in the Big 12, George, this was almost public knowledge, but I know for a fact this was the case. They wanted to play Florida before they actually ever got on the field, but they wanted it to be a home and home equal thing. And Florida was like, well, we'll play you, but come to our place first, and then we'll do it as a one-off because, now you're good. And they didn't want it. They said no for years on end. No, that's some bullshit. If you want to build a schedule that's worthy, play. And if it means you go on the road, if you're going to hang a banner that says national champ, you shouldn't be worried about where that game's played. The issue is I think these group of 5 teams like the scenario of, okay, our schedule's easier. We can win a conference title. We can only play 1 or 2 hard games a year, and we can coast right in and we can say that, hey, we got playoff appearances that say some other Power 4 programs that are clearly better or play tougher schedules don't have. That's what we got to get rid of. We need that rule out of there. There shouldn't be 2 group of 5s in there. And then I guess I'll ask you as we round it out, because of all that, if we agree there at least shouldn't be 2, you're going to put 1, and I wouldn't even put any in this year. And this is maybe a conversation for another day, but I want to throw it out there now. Is the fix that we need a group of 5 playoff and a Power 4 playoff, and you can be a national champ at the group of 5 level, but don't mess with what we're putting together because you're playing an easier schedule? You want to play an easier schedule? Go ahead, be a champ. Put it on the press box, but you're not playing in the same CFP where there's billions of dollars and your schedule's easier.
No, that doesn't solve anything either. Then you
it would have solved this CFP. They both would have been out, and then you would have Notre Dame and
a group of 5 playoff doesn't. Then what? Yeah, I'm the group of 5 champion. No, they're all in the football.
It would be it'd be similar to the FCS. You still could claim national championship.
Then they need to be in the football championship subdivision and not the football bowl subdivision. And there's
the issue with that, though, is then the FCS teams that are currently there would never win.
We can't conduct a championship among teams in the football bowl subdivision.
No, well, you change the wording then. You have the football bowl subdivision, which is just the Power Four, and then you make a different wording to have a 3-letter acronym for the
so we just demote
teams.
all of the teams that aren't. We demote all the teams to which is a
no. I am literally saying you demote the group of 5 teams to a different level of you have 3. No, instead of having 2 levels of the sport with FCS and FBS, you have 3. You have FCS, whatever you want to call that, and then FBS, and then you can have 3 champions in a given year, and you can put it on the damn press box. But like when Marshall won national title way back in the 90s, that was not a FBS title, so it's not even part of an argument.
You're skirting around something that's bandied about among certain folks, and that is
I'm not alone in this opinion here, and there are people that actually in the national media that have brought this up. This is not just a buzz talk.
Not what you're saying, but more of a actual promotion relegation type of system, a la European football.
Sure, no, I've said that in other sports too. I don't care. You want to call it relegation? I'm not scared of the word relegation. Here's why I would relegate. If you're not playing a hard schedule,
if you create a whole new class. This isn't me criticizing it, but if you have the FCS, and within FCS there's,
I'm not saying it'd be easy, by the way.
2, 3, but so you've got FCS down here,
and
you essentially want to create a middle ground of
financially that makes sense. They're spending the financial middle
ground here that is it's a championship level subdivision, and then the Power 4 conferences, maybe the Pac-12 if they get back there,
whatever you want to do,
becomes a Premier League type of deal.
100%. Yep.
And if you are, and you play yourself in, the conferences would have to be willing enough to be like, hey, if X team is good, then, but none of the teams that are currently there, say like Oklahoma State, who had a bad year, or, other teams would not want.
Well, you wouldn't. Well, what I want to make clear too is I would not, the starting point would be the current group of 5 conferences would start in the middle purgatory situation. Mm-hmm. You could, like you're mentioning with Premier League, you could get relegated. You could also get ascended. But I'm not going to relegate or I'm not going to decline and kill a program for 1 bad year, for 2 bad years. I would be reasonable and make this an incredible thing to get demoted. I'm not going to Oklahoma State having a couple bad years or West Virginia not ranked for 6 years. These are historic programs that are, top 15, top 20 is winningest ever. I'm not going to all of a sudden say they need put down. If West Virginia is not ranked for 20 years in a row, I'm willing to talk about it. Especially when you bring in Rich Rod.
Relegation, but like a stronger, a higher threshold, basically.
Yeah, man. I mean, if you're going to put 49 recruits on the board and you're going to spend $10 million in NIL and you're going to be the number 1 ranked team on every national service in Big 12 recruiting, and you're going to have Rich Rod going out there and saying you got to be in the Big 12 title game or you're not having a successful year, and you do that 5 straight years in his contract off of the Neil Brown tenure, let's get in a meeting because you failed. Yeah, let's talk about whether you want to get relegated or you want to spend some money to get freaking better. You got pressure to get better now. Yeah, but I mean, we can even go longer than that. I'm not trying to necessarily screw them up. I'm just trying to make the championship path fair, because there's no denying that as bad as some of even the programs we're covering right now and how down as they are, their schedules are still harder than what JMU put together. As much as I dog Maryland out of conference play, the damn conference schedule is harder than JMU's whole damn schedule. It's not a fair situation. That's what I'm saying. And here's the reason why this probably won't happen. Those group of 5 conferences don't want it because they know they got an easier path than West Virginia and Maryland in those schools, and they like it. Why screw it up? If we can play 1 Power 4 all damn year and then ride through this thing on an easy schedule, why not let's bounce in? Or what they would probably freaking do, which is the UCF doctrine of ridiculousness. If they're left out as team 13 or 14 and we take the rule out of there, they're going to go ahead and win the bowl game and claim a national title, as insane as that sounds. They would rather do that, because if they get into their own purgatory thing, it's going to be, one of them will win every year, but they're never going to be in there with the big boys. So to me, I'd support it. I don't care. You can call it relegation. You can call it copying Premier League. You can do it in other sports. Yeah, the Pittsburgh Pirates want to have 30 years in a row where they're in albatross. Yeah, spend some money or get relegated. Let's go. I mean, I'm not scared of the term. That's what I would do. I mean, we can do a whole show on it. We don't have to waste time here, but I want to make it clear. I think that this year, if we're ever going to have that conversation, They might have made a
time.
mistake getting 2 in this year, because you put those people in that meeting that are going to see the ratings and are going to hear this, and not just me, people who are legit that are saying it. And I'm not saying I don't believe they're going to do that next year, even though I do think we're going to take the rule out of there. They're not going to have to take the immediate chance.
The rule is going to specify 1 G5 and guarantee a spot for the ACC.
Right. So fine. But what I'm saying is that if there's any pushback on even that rule, or we get it somehow into this mess where we got the 1 G5, like for example, George, if next year we get rid of that rule and then we got 1 G5 that has Tulane or JMU's resume with 2 losses, and you're leaving out Texas for playing Ohio State, and it happens again and again and again, you're going to get in the meeting and they're going to say relegated to your little thing. That's going to, I mean, they're pushing this too much, and we'll see what they do in the playoff, but they're not playing a schedule. Here, if you want to play with the big boys, George, play with the big boys. Schedule some games.
Yeah.
Schedule some games. I mean, this does not take me being a jerk or analyzing this or covering the sport. You know, anyone's grandma can look at that schedule and tell me it's not as hard. I mean, I will even actually give credit. I don't know if you saw any replies to some of my tweets. I will give credit, and let me put the guy out there actually, because this was ridiculous. A lot of the group of 5 fans and JMU and Tulane fans are even conceding this point. They're not arguing the strength of schedule anymore like UCF used to do. They're agreeing their schedule was easier. I was shell shocked, and I even saw. Henry Given Sunday. I don't know who the hell that actually is. Obviously, the burner account, but Henry Given Sunday. I'm a JMU alum, and I agree with what you said here entirely. Well put. Schedules are easier. Yeah, I mean, again,
they're only out, and historically they have been better at this, obviously, but the only P4 team they played was Louisville, who they lost to. It's their only loss of the season in week 2. So
Louisville, who wasn't even in the ACC title game, and we talked about how bad that conference is this year, wasn't really involved in the tie-breaking scenario. I mean, I get they beat Miami, but look at Louisville's season. What are we doing here? And Tulane and Ole Miss, we've seen it. We got to see that again. The only thing I'm happy about is that Lane Kiffin didn't screw Ole Miss. We didn't have a Florida State result again, because those kids deserve to be there. The program deserves to be there. It's the best season they've had since the 60s. I think they still deserve to be in the damn CFP, even if they get blown out. And they got obviously controversy with the new head coach getting promoted. I'm happy Ole Miss is still there. I think they deserve to still be there. It wasn't as big of a conversation as when Florida State got booted for a quarterback getting hurt, but that was a 14 playoff. But I mean, 2 group of 5s. Come on. I mean, look at those schedules. Come on.
Speaking of Lane Kiffin, he finally makes a decision, goes to coach LSU. The day after the Egg Bowl.
Yep.
The rivalry game against Mississippi State that they win. Ole Miss in the playoff. We'll see how they will do. He takes the job at LSU, and now some of these other jobs start to go in. Specifically, we talked about the American, and who aforementioned James Madison after the interesting season that the Bruins had, where they fired their coach and then resurgent, and then they kind of, deliver the knockout blow to James Franklin in no short order of what they did to them, as Penn State would fire him just weeks after the loss out at the Rose Bowl. The Penn State, for their, I'll mention Florida too. Florida pulls in John Sumrall, Tulane's coach, as we mentioned Tulane here. The Ryan Silverfield, another American coach from
JMU,
Memphis,
and try to get back in. JMU is like the leapfrog to get back into the thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Ryan Silverfield from Memphis goes to Arkansas. So Golish from South Florida goes to Auburn. South Florida pulls, now we switch to the coordinator phase of the program. South Florida pulls Brian Hartline, the talented Buckeye wide receiver when he was a player, talented wide receiver coach, offensive coordinator. Ohio State has become wide receiver U in the past years between guys like Marvin Harrison Jr., Jeremiah Smith, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, Chris Olave. Tate, it's been my Bolitnikov vote every year is going to seemingly, it feels like a Buckeye player. He will now go to South Florida. So that's a super interesting move as South Florida can compete well recruiting wise in that state and get a lot of players there. Maybe they're a team that can win the American next year and get this exact same bid that we're talking about here. In terms of coordinators, Tosh Lupoy goes to Cal after working in Oregon under Dan Lanning and the Ducks up there. Colin Klein from Texas A&M to Kansas State, as Kansas State won't go to a bowl game. They have declined their bowl invitation. They'll get fined $500,000 for that by the Big 12, as will Iowa State, who Matt Campbell is a guy that has been talked about for years. Is he going to make a move to somewhere bigger than Iowa State?
Turn down other jobs. Turn down other jobs.
Turn down other jobs. It's like, all right, cool. He's going to stay there. No, Penn State, who hangs around the end of the cycle here after multiple people passed on their job or ended up somewhere else, and you're wondering, are they going to hire a coach?
Yeah, they handed out a lot of money to other people are paying, a lot of extensions thanks to Penn State.
And they had no recruiting class, and so now Matt Campbell comes in, and so that should be a boon for them if Campbell can reproduce the stuff that he did in his early time at Iowa State and in his recent time too with a guy like Rocco Becht, who was a good quarterback. And remember, Iowa State was a favorite in this league in the Big 12 when the season started, and then didn't have.
You also got to look at where Iowa State was before he got there. I mean, Iowa State was an afterthought for decades on decades on decades. Their last conference title was 1912, the year the Titanic freaking went down. They were nothing. So the people I've seen a lot of this comparing his record to James Franklin, and you don't like Franklin, it's very similar. It's not apples to apples. I mean, what he did at Iowa State with those resources, and that not even just the resources, but that program was an afterthought, is nothing short of miraculous. You could argue he maybe didn't seize the day on years they were supposed to be better. Like this year, they should have been better than they are. But based on Penn State hiring him when they did, after, I can tell you, they definitely got turned down by others. They originally had a plan for Cincinnati that immediately got extended by Indiana. They were giving other money away off extensions. We had leaked audio from former players and current players, and it got very, very ugly. And not only they end up with Matt Campbell, who's a damn good coach, plucking somebody from a Power 4, they keep Terry Smith, who was what some wanted to be the head coach and get promoted. Didn't have the really resume for it outside of high school ball and as a recruiter, and just $500 as an interim. I didn't think he'd ever get it, but people wanted him for a while. He stays. So you keep him as a recruiter. That maybe could help you with the roster. And then you also bring in Matt Campbell, who's a great damn coach. And even when they're not winning tons of games, they're great defensively, which is he brings his DC with him. So it could have been really, really bad for Penn State. And yeah, they signed literally 2 players on signing day. It looked really, really shameful and bad. And I don't think Pat Kraft did a great job. I think he landed ass backwards into, I'm Penn State, I got some resources, and I finally can steal somebody in Matt Campbell. And I don't know if I buy his excuse too, that we wanted him initially, but we couldn't communicate with him, and the number situation was off and we couldn't call him. Like, that's nuts too. But they end up with, nonetheless, whether it's on his accord or not, no matter who's responsible, because it was even out there that Penn State above Pat Kraft was getting involved. Like, the school was like, God, this is screwed up so bad. We got to get involved now. But yet, to get Matt Campbell, to keep Terry Smith, to bring in what Iowa State's already put together, to have it happen after what Matt Campbell did at Iowa State for so long and how bad that program was, and to build that up, it's a solid hire for Penn State. It's actually one of the better hires of the cycle if you look at it over freaking all, and you're moving on from Franklin based on who you're going to get, and you never were getting Urban Meyer, you were never really getting Cignetti. I think it's better than if you hired Matt Rule, who people wanted early on. Like, I think Matt Campbell's a solid damn coach, and they land on that. But of course, a lot of that got overshadowed by the drama of Lane Kiffin bolting from a playoff team, and that brings up, do you even need to change this calendar and make it less chaotic, because they moved the rule even in the middle of this damn thing that, okay, players can't go in the portal when a coach leaves, let's calm it down, but they can go in when you hire somebody, and you're still doing it in the middle here of December and November, in the middle of the freaking season for many, like certainly Penn State, and Virginia Tech hires a coach before their season's over, as awkward as that was, and then they bring Brent Pry back after firing him as the DC.
So
all of that that's all weird. In the NFL, who they're trying to say they are now kind of the same as, no matter whether your coach wants out of there or not, no NFL coach is leaving in the middle of a season, certainly not if they're a playoff team. You wait until it's all over. Does that need fixed? Gets brought up now too, because this was more chaotic than any other coaching cycle in the world. And you didn't even mention Chesney and him moving on to UCLA and taking JMU and getting somewhere after which Signetti did it before.
Chesney and Summerall will coach their teams. JMU and Tulane respectively in the CFP. So
and then some teams, Maryland was one. They end up basically getting stuck to keep their coach, and finances is part of that too. But it gets too chaotic. We're not in there. Yeah, I mean, and Wisconsin, Baylor, they end up Maryland actually beat them. Wisconsin's a mess. They're not nearly what they should be. But there are schools that end up having to keep their coach that you have to wonder. If Maryland would have lost 8 in a row, but only 1 or 2 coach got fired and everybody's out in the open, would they have then pulled the trigger? You have to wonder. So you get this was just so unique of an off season that I don't know if we're ever going to see this again. And it really wasn't an off season, I guess, is the problem too. But this really could be a what if story that changes the course of programs. Because then, for example, if you think it's a regulars year and Maryland loses 8 in a row and they do fire Loxley, next year, if they end up winning 6 games, they're probably keeping him again. He's going to be there 9, 10, 11 years because of how chaotic it was this year. That's just one example. And Wisconsin's another one. I think Wisconsin's almost a bigger deal because that's a big-time program that people expect more from, and they're even more down and out. So I think most of the schools did well on their searches, but it got more funky than it really ever does, and you got to fix this calendar somehow.
Yeah, Franklin basically had his pick of the choice there. He knows the state of Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia well, so he sticks around there. I'm curious about what your thoughts of Florida Kiffin are. Yeah, and you could almost argue that besides Penn State fans, who obviously have a mixed perception of James Franklin, that he might be more of a favorable character, especially if he can have success in Blacksburg. With respect to Virginia Tech, they're pining for a Michael Vick era that I think has passed them by.
Oh, the expectations are if he wins 7-8 games next year, he's not going anywhere for a decade. I mean, the expectations are way different.
If they could be at least in a conversation to play for an ACC championship, I think that will be a decade plus run at Virginia Tech.
I mean, he could actually win the damn conference. His recruiting, he's going to really make it rough for some of those those teams recruiting wise. But the expectations are way, way different. And I think the argument of whether Penn State should have fired him is a different argument. But once they did, because it was championship or bust. We'll see what they give Matt Campbell in terms of a timeline, because Pat Kraft is on record saying we are championship or bust here. And Matt Campbell, I think, is a great coach, but he doesn't walk in and go ahead and win you 11 games. I just don't. We'll see if that comes down. We'll see if that doctrine comes down and what he says when they're officially introduced. And right now, we just have Matt Campbell showing up in the airport there off an airplane that we got on Nittany Sports Now. But I'd love to see what Pat Kraft says. I even told him. I told Smeltzer, you better ask this man. I want to hear what the calling card is, because he said verbally, we're championship or bust every year. Are you holding that to Matt Campbell?
Yeah. The two ones to look at that I think will be the most interesting to follow next season are obviously Penn State, just because, hey, roster depleted, all this stuff. Are you now suddenly with
players? Yeah.
And then the LSU thing is interesting because you could argue that Lane Kiffin had kind of made the face turn back to sympathy after being fired.
Documentary was out. A damn documentary was out.
Documentary, fired on the tarmac at SC.
Yeah,
the garbage he left behind at Tennessee.
He's apologized for that. He apologized multiple podcasts. He's apologized to them.
The weird thing with the Raiders, like all of this stuff, he made himself into this sympathetic figure, and he just went.
Even a week before the decision, he was on the McAfee show, and with one of his freshmen who was an impact player, he was dapping him up, saying, he even in the Egg Bowl, he was crying for Trinidad because his jersey got stolen for an hour or two. He was. Yeah, people were defending him when his daughter went out there and announced her relationship with ironically an LSU player, and people even said at that point, that's not fair to do to your dad. He fully was a baby face. He had baby faced turned himself the last several years. And why, George? Because when you're a 32-year-old that gets put in the NFL at an historic franchise, people are going to say, you don't deserve that. People don't like people getting things they don't deserve. When you leave an historic program to go to SC, and I know you were an assistant under Pete Carroll in the Dynasty days, but what are they really doing there? And then you get sanctions, and all he did the whole time, even still, he complained about it, just excuses left and right. When he was involved in the recruiting sanctions before, telling me he didn't know about Reggie Bush's house when he was on the damn staff before. Come on now. And he's a great offensive mind, but people even question, what are you doing defensively? What he did at Tennessee was real rough there for 14 months. But when you get, and he had to go work under Nick Saban, I even could point to the babyface turn was kind of Nick Saban took him under his wing and then allowed him to cultivate there. He went to FAU and won games there when that hadn't happened in a long damn time, and obviously a hard place to win. They should, George, if they would have had the Lane Kiffin era this year, talk about the G5 conversation, they could have had a big run and squeaked in there. But he was at FAU, and that was fine. But then he goes to Ole Miss. And even when Eli Manning was there, they didn't end up getting Peyton Manning. Certainly even when Arch Manning was there. Throughout the history of Ole Miss football, they claim some things from the 60s, but since the 60s, they're an afterthought. They are middle of the pack SEC. People looked at it, okay, Lane Kiffin, you've got some opportunities maybe you didn't deserve. You've humbled yourself. You're willing to resurrect this damn place. You're not in Los Angeles. You're not with Saban. You're not in a glamorous place. You're at Ole Miss. And what did he do? He made them a legit contender. He made them a national contender. He gave them their best years, arguably ever in program history, but certainly since the 60s. He got his personality to get himself an Ole Miss on the damn Pat McAfee show. You could argue that obviously McAfee talks about West Virginia the most out of any program in the country, and national fans get annoyed. The second program he talks about is freaking Ole Miss because he loves some Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin's on there all the damn time because Lane Kiffin's personality got them there. They were getting recruits. They were beating some of these blue bloods, George. And I said this publicly. During the whole dance with LSU. In this era, we've seen it. Kirsten was able to tell Penn State, I don't need you. I can get it done here. I'm going to win the Big Ten here. Here's my new contract. I don't need to go to a blue blood. We can do it at one of the worst programs in college football history in this era. You put the money in, fine. Same with Texas Tech. Put the money in, we're good. And Lane Kiffin, maybe you could argue, would have been just as well off talking about the CFP at Ole Miss. They're in this year. LSU's not. The recruiting class is the same. The money in terms of NIL, they're putting money in. They're on the McAfee show. He can get it done there and win a national title and a legit one at Ole Miss and then put a damn statue up. And I said he should have stayed for it. Problem is, LSU backs the Brinks truck out, and even though Ole Miss could match the salary, LSU gives them an NIL bank that nobody else has. The facilities that nobody else has are still there. They literally told him that Ed Orgeron and Les Miles won national titles, and you're better than them, so you got to win them. Ryan Clark released that information. And, come aboard, and you just can't resist. And now he kind of screws over Ole Miss in the middle of their best season ever, and now is a heel over again. And, George, maybe for wrestling fans, we're talking heel and babyface. Maybe he's like the Randy Orton of this damn thing, where he's around forever. Randy Orton got, the love young, and then he was mostly a heel in his best years. Some of his babyface time, though, he still would win, but he always would publicly say he didn't feel comfortable. He wanted to be a heel. He embraced the heel more. Maybe Lane Kiffin would rather be the heel and thought, okay, I've taken the 6-year babyface run as far as I can go, and now I'm going to be the heel of all heels and do the Hulk Hogan leg drop and be a heel. Okay, maybe he embraces that. Maybe it's money he can't turn down. I think if he would have stayed at Ole Miss, George, he could make the playoff next year. He could make the playoff the year after that. He could keep on making these damn playoffs. Obviously, the team is in this year. It does suck that he does this to them in the middle of their playoff run. I'm glad they're still in. I defend them for not having him coach. People are all up in arms about that. I don't want Lane Kiffin sitting there trying to recruit my players in the middle of this, CFP run. I don't care what password he says he would have let somebody lurk in on. That just would have been weird. We went to West Virginia. When Rich Rod left, you're going to have Rich Rod still coach. He said later, since he got back to our press conferences, that he brought up, could I still coach? No, that's ludicrous. You're leaving me in the dust of the night, screwing me over. You're not going to coach the big, one of the bigger games. It's not going to go down. So I think SVP, actually, Scott Van Pelt brought this up perfectly, that if I'm in a marriage and I think it's going well, And all of a sudden I sit down, my wife and kids, and say, look, this is going well. Nope, it's not you. It's me. I want to now leave you for the neighbor down the street. But guess what? I'm willing to stay throughout the holidays because it's happened to be December and we already bought some gifts and it'll be emotional for the kids. No. Yes, it'll be easier if you stayed for the holidays for the kids. But no. If you're leaving everything going well now for the neighbor down the street, get yourself down the street. We're not going to stay through the holidays. What kind of a quest is that shit? Like, that's the comparison here. So I think he shouldn't have left. I get leaving for the money. LSU's a damn good job. Brian Kelly messed it up. I don't think it's a bad job in general at all, but it does kind of suck because in this era, this isn't like the past. You don't got to be out of blue blood to be in a national title now. You don't. And I think maybe in his brain he thinks he does. But the risk here is, George, if he would have stayed at Ole Miss, even if he never won a national title, if he would have stayed at Ole Miss and won 10 games a year, maybe not even an SEC title, but get in the playoff, win a big game or two, eventually get a statue there. They've really never had a run like this. At LSU, you mentioned the tarmac at USC. That was his dream job. If he's not careful with what they're investing, he literally speaking, he has to win a national championship within 3 years or he's probably gone. They're not going to F around with what they're investing. And if he's gone again, he might be back at FAU or needing Saban to help him out again. I mean, obviously he'll get a job, but he could get embarrassed from this decision. He's putting a lot on the line and his career and legacy on the line for this decision that I imagine he thinks is the way to, buy a championship and go to the Hall of Fame. But if he does not, just ask Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly had a solid Hall of Fame resume at Notre Dame. He was in the national title game. He was in a conversation all the time. He's won BCS bowl games.
Championship winning coaches, and Nick Saban left to go to the pros before he ended up at Alabama.
Right, but I mean, Brian Kelly, as much as I'll make fun of him too, and the accent was ridiculous, and all of our colleagues, he's butt of college football media. His resume is not that damn bad. At Notre Dame, he won a lot of games there, as an independent and did have a hard schedule, did beat some ranked opponents. The national title loss is to freaking Bama. He had a great run, and now he's the butt of jokes and nobody wants him. No one wants to touch him. He's worrying about suing schools. That could be Lane Kiffin if he's not careful. I mean, he got to win a national title. We can argue about Penn State and what they're going to give to Matt Campbell and all that. No, it's pretty clear. I think we would agree. At LSU, if Lane Kiffin does not win a national championship within the next 3 to 4 years, he's probably getting fired. It is a failure. People are going to turn on him on the national media, and he'll regret this at that time then. He would. But at Ole Miss, he wouldn't have that pressure. He could keep on 10 wins a year, no national title, and it'll be fine. But that's not going to be the life at LSU.
I know, we're in this arms race for money across the sport. You see what Texas Tech has done. Yeah, they bought their team. Well, the teams in the Southeastern Conference were doing that for years. So it's nice to see the equity that has come to the sport when other teams that can do that can do it. And LSU got deep pocketed people in this, and LSU is a more unique experience, of course, than Ole Miss. Ole Miss can compete with them for talent. It's not like I know that LSU's
not NIL wise based on what's been reported.
Based what's been reported, there's a gulf there. But I think that the conference it just becomes so flattened now when you've got so many of those teams in there that it's not like LSU is A&M's a player in it. Bama's always going to be a player in it.
Yeah. I think the recruiting issue, even if you don't believe reports, is though there's more talent in Louisiana than in Mississippi.
In the state, sure.
So if you own Louisiana,
if you own this,
you're better off than if you own Mississippi.
It's fair. Yeah.
That's not even, you don't have to report that. That's fact.
Yeah.
So maybe that's in his brain too.
But I'm with you. It's like
because I gave the SVP. Would you let him coach the CFP?
No, hell no. Mainly because we're talking literal apples and apples. Like Bob Chesney going from James Madison to UCLA, who was
let him finish out of JMU. It's a different level, right?
Different level. No, we're not going to let you go from one SEC team in the way you did it to another SEC team. And
the other end of it is what? Now I don't think they're going to do this. But if Ole Miss wins the national title, do you give Kiffin a ring? Does he get on the book? Does he get on the wall? I mean, he coached the damn thing the whole day through. Does he get on the record book as the national championship coach?
I feel like you can't not, but you're just going to send it in a box. Yes, you're not going to present.
Does it get on the Wikipedia page that he's a national championship coach?
You get. Yeah.
I don't know if it does. I don't know if it does.
You don't know that
he's not coaching in the CFP. This is where you get this is the selector that nobody's going to debate in any meeting.
12 of the presumptive 15 games.
Oh, okay. Here's how. Oh, you want an example again? This goes back to what I brought up at West Virginia. Who's on the wall in the mural for the Fiesta Bowl win?
Bill Stewart. Yeah.
Rich Rod coached the whole season. And here's the other one. Forget West Virginia. When Michigan won the 1989 NCAA College Basketball National Championship with Steve Fisher before the Fab Five, do you know how many games he coached in that regular season? 0.
You tell. He
coached the playoff though. He coached the NCAA tournament. And who's the championship coach there? Mm-hmm. Him. So are you saying that his predecessor got screwed? Should he get on the wall too? Should they have the two of them? Put him in a little Photoshop him in or something? I'm just saying that I obviously Lane Kiffin, if he didn't do the work, they wouldn't be in this position. I 100% hear that, logically speaking. I don't want you to discount Ole Miss being petty as hell and saying no.
Yeah.
It's up to them to give him the ring. It's up to them to put him on the wall. It's up to them to put him, just tell the NCAA they want to give it to him. They could say, you didn't leave us in February. You didn't leave us, you dang. And here's another thing. He dangled. He was on the McAfee show. He was on social media. He was making a mockery of the damn thing. And then I'll say this too. I've been in viral moments with head coaches and been talked about on ESPN, made fun of on those shows last year with Neil Brown and to a lesser extent than this. And I'm not necessarily saying that you want to make a habit of calling people names in general, but you have a reporter that called him a hoe. And because you always are looking for the next thing, that he was sleeping around. He's flirting around. He's not just trying to stay, hey, I'm in a great marriage here. Why do I need to hoe around? I'm looking for the next best thing to get out of my marriage, despite it being successful with kids and we're raising a damn family here at Ole Miss. And George, he didn't just take it on the chin and let it just be a little podcast. I don't even know why the hell he was listening to it, but he confronted the guy on the field, tried to embarrass him there, and then in the press conference calls him out again. And I wish, forget the reporter's name, but I wish the Ole Miss reporter would have went at him and said, I'm doubling down, gave him something. There was time there to do that. But my point here is, George, Lane Kiffin was brazen this whole damn time. And then what does he do? A couple days later, after confronting a kid for calling him a hoe, what does he do? He hoes around and takes the LSU job. I mean, what did he do? He hoed around. Come on. That is the issue here. And again, Lane Kiffin may win a national championship at LSU, and if he does, great. His win percentage bar is there. He has well over 595 in the win percentage bar. He'll be a Hall of Famer then. Maybe he'll never go to the NFL again. But here's what I will tell LSU fans. Once a hoe, always a hoe. LSU is a better job than Ole Miss, sure. Just like he thought SC was a better job than Tennessee. Do you honestly believe, George, this is Lane Kiffin's last rumor, hoeing around? No. This is the last one. Here's what he's going to do. There are 2 opportunities for him, and one's a what-if story to this year. But there are 2 jobs that he would leave LSU for, and one of them would shock the damn conference. The other one would make sense, but maybe not be as shocking. One of them, in the NFL, I could easily see him, especially if he wins the national title, saying, I did it when I was younger. He's admitted this. I wasn't ready then. Al Davis was nuts. I was 30-some then. Now I'm in my 50s. Now I'm a good coach. That was 20 years ago. Especially if I win a natty, I want to try that damn thing again. And especially if he wins a Super Bowl, then he's in a real elite group. I could see him getting lured. There'd be a lot of money thrown at him even in a year or two if he starts winning at LSU right away. And the other one is, I could see him leaving for Alabama.
Bama, yeah.
He coached under Saban. He won there with Bama. I could certainly see it. He's obviously not going to go back to SC because he already tried that and they already fired him once, the tarmac. So his other dream job is probably Bama. I could see him leaving LSU for Bama and saying that's even more historic of a program. I wanted, you didn't get to do it after Saban because DeBoer's getting in the playoff, but say he doesn't win a national title. I want to go ahead and do it. And you also have to wonder. Here's a question for you, George. Now, obviously, Bama got in the playoff, and I actually do believe they deserve to be there. But there were conversation earlier in the season about, are they going to fire DeBoer? Nobody really wanted him there. He was an outsider. They brought him in off a great run. People thought it was an aberration. He's not Saban, even though Saban was that guy too. He's not picking up where Saban left off for some Bama fans. And Do you think that if they would have fired DeBoer and they didn't make the playoff, do you think Kiffin would have not left for LSU, but left for Bama? You have to imagine Bama would have went after him if that job was open. They could match everything. Yeah. And if it's Bama versus LSU going after Kiffin, I imagine he takes Bama.
And he's got a close relationship with Nick, obviously, as we found out throughout this process.
Yeah, Nick telling him to go to LSU, who obviously Nick won a national title there at LSU. I bet you any money that if Bama and LSU job are both open, Nick Saban telling him to take Bama. He obviously won more there. He's more aligned there. So if it happens again in a couple of years, you don't think he would think about that one and they wouldn't go after him again? Again, once a hoe, always a hoe here. Lane Kiffin's a great coach. I love seeing him on the McAfee show. I think Lane Kiffin, I've said this before, is a great personality for the college game. I'm not even sure if he goes to the NFL, his personality would fit there. I think he fits the college game perfectly, and he is a great damn coach and a great recruiter, and he has the right idea for these kids. But I don't begrudge Ole Miss for not letting them coach the playoff. I'm not going to begrudge anyone for taking any kind of job. I think he handled this horrendously, and I think he will leave LSU just like he left everywhere else. 100%. I mean, I 100% do. Now, away from Kiffin, where do you stand on Penn State landing after bungling up a search, landing on Matt Campbell? I think it's actually a good hire.
It ends up working out in a backdoor way in their favor because everybody's like, who in the heck are they going to have? Because everybody they targeted ended up taking jobs.
Brian Daboll was getting freaking brought up. I mean, they were whittling it down.
Daboll, obviously mid-season we had Matt Rule re-strengthened with Nebraska. Signetti signed a contract extension in Indiana. There's somebody else I'm forgetting that signed an extension. Another, head coach.
There were some of them wanted Chesney. They were Penn State fans that wanted Chesney as well. But yeah, I mean they were handing out contracts to other coaches.
Yeah. So congrats to Penn State for getting everybody paid in the league pretty much.
We didn't publish this, George, but you would have liked this. I will tell you in a group text. We had a created graphic of Pat Kraft as Santa Claus passing out extensions. We had I will say from an anonymous coach on an anonymous staff that I won't reveal did text me and say that Pat Kraft is good luck Chuck. Penn State is good luck Chuck right now because everything that they even get rumored to be going after ends up with a job elsewhere. So that's kind of where it was. And George, it got so wild that LeVar Arrington was talking about Jay Paterno being responsible. Like it was getting, remember that? That was the day before. So that's not private. That was public. So you get here, and I think for them to land on Matt Campbell, you could argue they should have just hired him from the jump. It was a perfectly good coach. He's from a P4. He's young. He's won. You could argue that if whatever he did at Iowa State, give him more resources, he'll do more. Nothing's a guaranteed championship every given year, but their schedule's easy as pie next year. Talking about schedules. They, again, no Power Fours out of conference play. Schedule's easy. I think that it's a good hire. I think he'll win there. I think he'll recruit there. You might be screwed for 1 year though with no recruiting class, and they're gonna have to go fully Rich Rod style into the portal here, and that's just hard to do for anybody. But eventually Matt Campbell will win. Maybe he'll even be fine next year. It just got really crazy, and I don't think it's fair to compare him with James Franklin. I think it's a different scenario at Iowa State than at Penn State. But I do like the hire for Penn State, but I do also feel that this got legitimately bad in a way that yes, they got a good coach, but I don't really want to give Pat Kraft as much credit as maybe he'll get for getting Campbell in there, I guess. And I also think, George, that if this does not work out in a couple years and they're not back in the CFP in a couple years, I think Pat Kraft goes before Campbell. Because I think Pat Kraft got a lot of pressure on himself. So I think now he's kind of on the line as well. And do you think Penn State gets back in the CFP before Virginia Tech gets there and Franklin gets them there? It's an easier road in the ACC. If Virginia would have won that game over Duke, they'd be in automatically. You imagine if Virginia Tech
that's actually.
And I'm not even saying whether it's fair. No, I'm just saying, do they get in? Whatever path, you got a path.
Yeah.
Penn State harder in the Big Ten. ACC is open.
I'm inclined to give it. I'm inclined to lean Franklin. Penn State with their built-in schedule can
Can rack up early season wins. Sure.
Can rack up early season wins.
They get preseason rankings.
They can be not necessarily an Alabama, but like they can be a 2-loss team that doesn't play in the Big Ten championship
and
game,
get in and get
but
in
loses to Ohio State and or Oregon and or insert team here and still get in.
That's what they did with Franklin. That's what they did with Franklin, right?
With exactly what they did with Franklin. Whereas Virginia Tech
cannot do that. They cannot,
as we've seen, needs to win the whole damn league because the league is awful. So yeah,
or at least if they don't have to win the whole damn thing, they got to do like Miami. They don't win the thing, but they have a great resume, and they got to do Miami. Like Miami didn't win the thing, and they got in.
Yeah.
I think they would get kind of, it's not the same as say Wake Forest. I think the national media would bump them in if Franklin's kicking ass and they're 10-2 and they have a win over Notre Dame or something. But I would lean Franklin. Especially because next season
I would lean Franklin.
I think next season Franklin has a chance to win, say, 8 games. And I think Penn State maybe would win more overall because their schedule's easier. But I think because the ACC, Franklin might be in the conversation for the conference title longer, because 8 games in the ACC, 8 or 9 games there is going to keep you in it. Look at Pitt. They could do a Pitt season. That's kind of what I'm saying Franklin can maybe do in year 1. I mean, he took a lot of the Penn State. Basically, George, any recruit from Penn State that West Virginia did not take, Franklin took with him.
Mm-hmm.
He took a lot of those kids. And to have, I will also hand it to him. You got to give it up. In an era with everybody being selfish and egomaniacs, James Franklin and Brent Pry are selfless and not egomaniacs in any way. So great job for them, especially Pry being humble enough to go back there after I wouldn't do it. I don't know about you. I mean, if they fire, I'm not going back there to be the DC after I just get fired. But him being there, I think that's a good hire. It's just weird because he just got fired. I think Franklin is going to turn that around and is going to win there. We'll see what that means. I don't know if I'm saying he's going to natty, but I think he'll be maybe a CFP team at some point there. And Penn State can get in without winning the Big Ten. But, it sucks for Matt Campbell. I think Matt Campbell's a great damn coach, but do I think they're going to be better than 3rd or 4th in the Big Ten, even this new iteration, and do more than Franklin? No. I think he's likely going to win 10 games a year. Like Franklin, once every 10 years, he'll maybe win a conference title. Once every 10, like Franklin did. I don't think he's ever going to be Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon on a regular basis. USC, if they ever can get their act together with all the money there and the history there, he shouldn't even maybe be that. So we'll see, but I think he's a great coach. And keeping Terry Smith is a big deal. But
yes,
I would lean Franklin. Is there any coaching hire that you hate, that you think this program swung and missed? Because most of them, to be fair, despite it being really wonky, most of them are okay enough that I don't know if I'm going to yell about. But is there any that is just an awful coaching hire that they're going to hurt their program? Like, are they going to go down a Neil Brown or Mike Loxley road, and it's going to be seemingly a good hire at the time, but then you're going to get into this period where it's less than what you expect?
Yeah, I think Florida's okay. Depends
on their expectations there, though.
Yeah, it's a very, but the expectations have come way down with how bad the Napier years have been here.
You would think, but who knows?
It's a program that can win national championships, believes it can compete for them, but they're not as like nuts in the head about it like LSU, where they think it's.
Well, it's also because they've won natties, but it's a roller coaster ride. Either they win a natty or they're 4th or 5th in the conference. Even when Spurrier was there, they weren't dominant all the way through.
Correct. No, because all of these, it's relatively.
I don't think anything was a bad hire. I'm just asking.
Yeah, everything's relatively safe. I think Brian Hartline's going to do really well at South Florida.
I think it's a better job than if he would have got the Penn State job. By the way,
yeah,
a lot of Penn State fans wanted him, but that would have been a pressure cooker. That would have been rough.
Receiver talent. I don't know if that played a factor in his decision. The receiver talent that comes out of the state of Florida, just because you got guys that can run track and things like that, and be year round training and. West Virginia, what WVU's benefited from that for a long time. So I think if he can get some of those kids to Tampa,
keep them in house instead of going to West Virginia, and you could argue that that's Power 4, but we look at the CFP opportunity here, like that could help recruiting. Yeah,
I think and his track record with, as you saw, Chris Henry Jr. ended up sticking out and staying with Ohio State.
Sure.
In his recruitment and Hartline, who recruited him there. But man, you can go into somebody's house and, say, look at these guys that are in the NFL that have won the awards, that have won national championships as wide receivers. And I can bring you here to South Florida and do that. I think that'll be interesting to watch him work next year.
Even better, here's guys who've been a first-round draft pick. It's not even so much whether you win an Natty or not. These kids, they want money and to get to the NFL. I mean, Chris Henry Jr. wants to get he's not even saying he wants to get the NFL, and Ohio State gives him a better shot of doing it. Even if some want him to go to WVU, and you could argue whether they had a shot or not. I think they kind of did, but he went to Ohio State, probably the best choice for him. I don't think it's a bad hire for them, but I want to make this clear. And this is actually even why, as much as I agree Maryland had to keep Locksley with how chaotic this is, the only thing I would have maybe thought about actually firing him, even though obviously he's been a bad coach and been there way too long and shouldn't get all these chances. I could argue Maryland's a better job than UCLA. Like, if you think you can get Bob Chesney and he's at UCLA, I like him as a coach. I hate that job. Nobody is successful there. They care about basketball more than anything else there. You're recruiting against USC, who's going to get those kids over you all the damn time. You got a lot of pressure there, but you rarely win. I hate that job. I think he's fired in 2 or 3 years. They expect more than what they ever produce there. It's not like they're cool with 6-6. They think they can do more, but they never do on a regular basis. I think it's a bad job. And George, again, I do believe, and I get why Locksley was kept, that when you're 7-8 years into something and you have basically a Neil Brown tenure or even worse, and you're losing that many games in a row, you're near the region. Like, if they could have got Chesney instead of UCLA, that would change it for me. I would hire him if I was Maryland. I would have brought him in. I would rather have him than Locksley. So if that's an opportunity, and I'm not saying I know that it was an opportunity for Maryland, but if they could have got him, then I would have said go ahead and get him. UCLA, I just think, is a bad job. I could argue Maryland's a better job than that, even though they both haven't won recently. So that's the one I got to throw out there. And then I will also throw this out, too, as we round out the college segment here and maybe take a break and talk some Hall of Fame and whatever else. I got to do this. I covered him. We went viral. Got to show some love. Neil Brown back into this damn thing. Neil Brown, head coach, North Texas. I know from sources close to him that people kept throwing him out there for all those G5 jobs all the time. Charlotte last year, jobs this year, Colorado State, etc. this year. He didn't really want to do the G5 thing, even if you think maybe he should have. Maybe he's better suited there. I agree. But there are a lot of people that told me he did not want to be a head coach at a group of 5 unless he thought it was really special or he loved the location. He's familiar with Texas.
Yeah.
His family loves it there. They already were in Texas, working at Texas, but they're familiar with Texas. He can recruit there. And I think North Texas can be special. There's a connection there from even, Ren Baker and that having been the AD there. And I wouldn't be surprised if there were some strings pulled there. And we've seen now, George, even if the rules changed, North Texas was right in that conversation. I mean, North Texas with Neil Brown could get you. You want to tell me who's in a CFP first, Neil Brown or Locksley or Rich Rod? I might go Neil freaking Brown if we don't change some rules. I mean, they could go and win 10 games and run through that schedule with an easier slate and then be the new JMU or be the Tulane. So I think that's a good spot for him as young as he is. I could see him winning there. And I could see him becoming a Power 4 player again in the next 5 years. I think that's a good spot for him to be in. And congrats to him for getting it. I wish him luck. I think it's a good spot. And, you couldn't let Neil Brown do the Locksley thing there because obviously it got so toxic with billboards, et cetera, that aren't happening in College Park. But I think he's fine. I think North Texas is a good job for him. It doesn't have the history of West Virginia, but I think it's a good job in this era. Happy he got one. I think it's a better job than Colorado State, for example, with the other rumors. Certainly a better job than UConn. I'll tell you that I know for a fact. He told me this directly, and he's put this out to others, so I can say this. He turned down Charlotte last year. Good call. UMass was ludicrous. Like, that would have been a horrendous job. George, they went 0-12. Like, that would have been really bad. You don't want to go there. UConn's independent. They win 9 games, and nobody cares. They got to be in a conference. That's not a good job.
If Poggi, who a couple years ago was Charlotte's coach, he's now Michigan's offensive coordinator. So he's on. Right. Yeah, shows you how.
Well, I mean, but Brown told me he turned down Charlotte. I mean, I'll say that. But I think that by waiting and taking $40,000 from Texas and humbling yourself, I think North Texas, out of all the jobs he's been rumored for, is a good job for him. And I could see him having success there, winning some games there, I'm not saying CFP necessarily, but I could see him winning a conference. I could see him, getting that conversation for the CFP as a group of 5. I think that's a really good job. So congrats to him and his family for getting it. Maybe a little less pressure there. They're going to give him some time. And I could even see in the pictures, I think he's happy. So I'm glad that he's happy with what he's had to deal with in recent years as well. So I think that's a good spot for Neil Brown, and maybe we'll end up being one of the more underrated hires of this cycle, as chaotic as it was. We'll see what this shows us in a couple of years when we revisit this could be a 30 for 30 on just the month of November and December on the coaching cycle alone.
Let's round it out in the world of baseball, where the Contemporary Baseball Era Committee, Veterans Committee, lack of a better term,
what it was called,
has voted for on its ballot of selections that will go along with the names that will be announced from the BWAA next month into Cooperstown next year. Of the names that were on that list that included Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Don Mattingly, and others, the only one actually selected for induction was Jeff Kent of all people. Jeff Kent, known for his hitting, known for kind of being a dick too. 377 home runs, the most home runs by a second baseman in Major League Baseball history.
Known for a fight with Bonds, if you a physical fight in the dugout, if you want to talk about
fight in the dugout. 1,518 runs batted in, 290 career average, 856 OPS. 4 times was named a Silver Slugger, the 2000 National League MVP, 5 All-Star Game appearances, 0 Gold Glove appearances. Was not known for his fielding, and hit after Bonds in an era where Bonds was walked the most in baseball history, allowing him to kind of reap the rewards there. Bonds
won an MVP right before Bonds got into those mega monster years via steroids. Like he did right before the year before the 2001 73 home run season. He squeezed an MVP out of there, and it was hard to win those in that period.
Carlos Delgado, Dale Murphy, Gary Sheffield, Fernando Valenzuela, the other names that were on that contemporary era ballot. If they don't want to yet have, and it comes down to the crux of this, right, Mike? It's if you don't want to have still this debate or conversation about guys who may or may not have used steroids.
I was telling people I didn't think they were going to do it. People thought Bonds and Clemens were going to get in this year.
I say may or may not because I think Sheffield was also a name that would Gary not in that era. The Gary, like a lot of people, Bagwell, but Bagwell's in, obviously.
Yeah, people on the Mitchell Report are in the Hall of Fame. Bud Rodriguez is in the Mitchell Report in the Hall of Fame, and I even argue that certainly Bonds and Clemens have better careers than McGuire and Sosa. But if this is an argument too, if you're going to elect some steroid users, then why not all of them? If there was no steroid cloud, Sosa has 600 plus home runs, an MVP, 360 home run seasons. He would have got in as well. But if you think it was all softening, okay, do you put Bonds and Clemens in? But once you got to terms that they just weren't going to get in, because you could argue it's harder with this now Veterans Committee, this selection than it would even be with the voters, because they are getting younger. Then do you end up with anybody or no? There have been years where they've said no to everybody on this.
And then for me, it's I don't know if that makes Jeff Kent a Hall of Famer. Right. If we're not going to like confront some of these harder questions, I think you can make a case for Fernando Valenzuela, just if we want to go on impact and hit rookie of the year and MVP, or sorry, rookie of the year and Cy Young.
I mean, it just was only 3 elite years though. That's the problem. It was so small chunk.
Yeah. We're looking at the small sample size portion of it. Right. Kind of like
you'd have to argue that he, for like the Hispanic culture, was kind of Ichiro and Ohtani. Like he was that for a small chunk of time, but it would almost be as if Ohtani retires tomorrow and you get a 3-year period.
Correct.
But that's the problem with him. I think the Hall of Fame, as you know, they want a career. They want a long stretch. It's very rare for them to say, we're doing the Terrell Davis thing. This is not the pro football voters. Yeah. So I never thought he really had a chance. I think the only debate here would have been Kent versus Don Mattingly. I'm a little surprised Mattingly didn't do better in voting, because I believe he only got 6 votes.
Mhm.
And there are former Yankees that are in that room. They released the names, I don't have it in front of me, of who was in that room. There are former Yankees. There are people connected to the Yankees. I thought maybe that would bump him. He just finally, as a coach, as a bench coach, made his first World Series appearance. Great hitter, MVP, didn't appear in any World Series team for the Yankees, which is very rare for their history, obviously. Just missed out on the dynastic run in the 90s, retiring before that, but was a great hitter. And if you're going to put DHs in, like David Ortiz and Edgar Martinez, more likely as a comparison recently, then do you feel better about Don Mattingly, who also was a solid defensive player when he was healthy? That is another conversation. I thought maybe he actually had a chance. And even some believe, if you want to talk about cultural impact as a slugger in a steroid era, even Carlos Delgado. I think he's more Hall of Very Good. I think Mattingly, for me, is more Hall of Very Good, but I wouldn't have been as mad if he got in. Here's why. If you're going to put Edgar Martinez in, I could see Don Mattingly. They're very, very similar. But you get to Jeff Kent, and if you had to tell me that there's one guy that goes in from this group and you're not including steroid guys with a legit shot, I'm a little surprised Kent goes in, but I don't really have a problem with it.
Delgado, there's 14 people on the committee, 12, obviously 75%, same threshold as
Delgado got closer than the
writers. Delgado got 9 votes, came 3 votes short there,
which is a big deal. I mean, he'll get to stay on this damn thing by getting 9.
Yeah,
Bonds and Clemens are off this thing for years now.
Yeah, Mattingly, half of the votes 6. Dale Murphy, half of the votes 6. And as Mike mentions, Bonds, Clemens, Sheffield, Burnett, Valenzuela, less than 5, which means they are not eligible in 2028. The next time the committee cycles up,
I believe they're not eligible until 2031.
Correct. So it's a 3-year cycle. Doing the math, 31.
And then to also make it clear,
6 years from this vote.
Right.
December of 2031.
31, yeah, but right, and they would, if they get in, they'd be inducted into 32 in 32, but it'd be 31 would be the voting. Yeah. And here's the issue for them, and maybe we'll get even more softened at that point. Maybe they'll jump up from 3, 4, 5, 6 votes to way higher. The way it works, if they don't get in 2031, they're done for life. As the rules stand now, they could change. As the rules stand now, if you get below the 5 votes multiple times on this, whether it be this new era, golden age, whatever of these veteran committees after the actual voting, that's it. You don't get another shot. George, you also need a certain percentage of the voters to even be, of the votes initially on the ballots to even be here. There's a reason why Sammy Sosa, McGuire, etc. are not even here, but Bonds and Clemens got to hear. This also tells me, you want to read some tea leaves, people that are even up, that are on current ballots still, Manny Ramirez, Alex Rodriguez, clearly they're not going to get the votes, clearly, even though they're getting 40-some percentage, and clearly they're going to get here, and clearly they're not going to get voted here if they're not handling Bonds and Clemens well. So, yeah, there might be different people in the room, but that shows you what they're going to do in the future. And I guess what I will say, George, my defense of Jeff Kent is that I could see him having to wait, sure. You could argue that Bonds helped him by being walked so much. But by the way, George, to make this clear, he hit behind Bonds a lot. He didn't hit, it wasn't like Bonds, I mean, he hit behind Bonds. Bonds would hit 3 and he would hit 4. They sometimes would flip it where Bonds would hit 4 and he would hit 3. But for the early days of that prime before the end of Bonds' career, it was where Bonds was 3 and he was 4. So it wasn't like Bonds always protected him. But nonetheless, Bonds was there and it helped him out. But if you're going to tell me somebody, George, you take the name away and somebody says in any given sport, especially when there's no, major cloud outside of just maybe being a sorely person, that this person has some numbers that are at the top, near the top of their position all time. And that's Jeff Kent in terms of slugging numbers, slug percentage, home run, RBI. If I tell you somebody in their position is near the top in multiple numbers, especially the eye-popping slugging numbers of home runs, even though he didn't get 500 overall, but he's right up there with his number at the top for second base, plus that person won an MVP, that person likely is a Hall of Fame player. Like that person likely needs to be remembered and needs in the Hall. If it's a museum, you need to kind of chronicle that person and put him in that Hall of Fame. That is the defense of Jeff Kent. And I also will say, George, now that he's going to be a Hall of Famer, his wins above replacement is certainly not the lowest of anybody in there. I mean, Andre Dawson's still in. They're not taking him out.
Or 39, I'm sorry.
For who?
For Kent, right?
Jeff Kent, no, Jeff, that's more Dawson. Jeff Kent's wins above replacement is, if you're talking about baseball reference, so the BWR is 55.4.
55, sorry. Mm-hmm.
So it's higher. The number you're probably thinking of is one of the lower numbers for Hall of Famer ever, is more of where Dawson is of 39. Nobody else under 40 is ever in. But my point is, Kent at 55.4 is pretty good. And I lean on baseball reference, BWR. Some people may want to go for others, but 55.4 is not a bad WAR. That is not a bad WAR for Hall of Famer. That is just not a bad WAR. Yeah. So he's in now, and he didn't do much defensively. He almost stole 100 bases. That's not incredible, but still it's better than 0. I mean, if you compare him off of black ink and things like that, he's compared to a lot of guys that are already in the Hall of Fame. Again, I don't hate him being in there based on the position. And here's another one. Here's a perfect comparison. I pulled baseball reference up, and here's the bottom comparison. Different positions a little bit, but some say that Jeff Kent actually should have played third base, George. Very similar to Scott Rowland. Scott Rowland got the votes. He got the votes. So if you're going to vote somebody in Scott Rowland, I mean, I don't mind Jeff Kent now in this situation. Now, I believe a little bit that maybe they wanted to put somebody in, so they figured out who do I want to put in out of this group. Maybe they didn't want to have a year where they put nobody in because they were very criticized. If you recall, a couple of years ago, they put nobody in. I do think they wrote an injustice right when they put Fred McGriff in a couple of years ago, because Fred McGriff retired at 493 home runs. If he had 500, he probably would have got voted in. Was a great defensive first baseman who also was a slugger during the steroid era, played on great teams all the way through. For me, Fred McGriff deserved to be in the Hall of Fame off just the voters, but I'm glad that he eventually got in. But I don't have a problem with Jeff Kent being there if I had to pick somebody out of this group. Again, Mattingly is the only other one that I could have seen a debate on. I think the others are more Hall of very good. And I guess what I'll ask here, number one, how would you have felt if Mattingly got in? Because he clearly didn't get close, even people were kind of predicting that maybe he would have been closer. And then number two, if we can project, and whatever George predicts here is not going to happen, it'll be the opposite. Do you think Bonds and Clemens get in on their very last shot ever in 2031, or do we have a Hall of Fame where they're never in? Seems far from now, but it's not that many years from now. You are muted, by the way, though. I can't hear you at all. I'm not hearing you through my mic. There you go. No, I don't. Looks like we're throwing some ads here in for the podcast listeners. I don't know. I literally cannot hear you at all. I hear that. There you go. Did you hear me? Now I don't hear you on the mic, though, by the way.
2 seconds.
There you go.
Yeah.
George Gerbo's back. Actually, way
there we
too
go.
loud now. You're louder than me. Well, now, okay. Now you're back. So,
yeah.
Would you have had a problem if Mattingly got in? And then do you think Bonds and Clemens get in on their last shot in 2031?
I'll start the second half first. I think in 6 years that the electorate of that, even though it was less than 5 now, you got to get to 12. Man, it's such a. I think
you're thinking it's not going to be all young people in that room. We're not talking about voters. We're talking about
it's still they're not
going to all going to die. I mean, come on.
And to give you a sense here, because this part is public. Jason Stark, of course, longtime baseball writer. Steve Hurt, Elias Sports Bureau, he's on it. Actual executives, current executives, Kim Eng, Terry Ryan, Mark Adonacio, Doug Melvin, Artie Moreno.
Former players are there as
former
well.
players like Fergie Jenkins, Jim Cott, Juan Marshall, Tony Perez, Ozzie Smith, Alan Trammell, Robert Yount, a couple of those guys, managers, of course.
In past years, Tony La Russa was on it, by the way.
Tony La Russa helped get his buddy Harold Baines into the Hall of Fame, who didn't deserve Hall of Fame. So that's kind of
another thing. I don't have a problem with Jeff Kent because you got Baines in, but go ahead.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I go with Mattingly, is that if we're going to kind of do this.
Aren't you shocked, though, you named Yankees and they didn't do it? You had former Yankees in there.
I know, yeah, which is kind of like the weird part, especially after the kind of the glow up that he got
with the Blue Jays run. He was on Dan Patrick's show talking about
the Hall of Fame. And it's like, hey, look at this. He's had a great career. Yankees at a time, like you said, were the Yankees the last time really the Yankees were in turmoil when Mattingly played there. Dodgers, long career, never actually in any capacity and made it to the World Series.
It's really funny. Mattingly got to the Yankees in 82. In 81, they made the World Series and lost to the Dodgers. He left the Yankees in 95. That Mariners series with Griffey running the bases was his last series, last game of his career. And then in 96, they go on the dynastic run.
Yeah.
And there were rumors, by the way, of the Orioles trying to bring him back in 97, but he never came back. He retired too soon. What sucks about Mattingly for me, and I know Dan Patrick, to his credit, asked him this, that no one really has asked him about if he regrets that decision to retire, because he's admitted he was not as hurt as people thought he was at that point. He could have kept playing, which is why he flirted with Baltimore. I'm going to say this to Donnie Baseball, who doesn't, they didn't really go this far. If he would have stayed on the Yankees and crawled and hit 150 and to nothing ring, but won the ring, he would be in.
Yeah.
He says he doesn't regret it because he doesn't believe that's true. He's wrong. It's 100% the case.
The perception would be,
because I know they had him and Dan. They both talked about it, and he told him, I still don't think it would have mattered. Well, no, they would have put you in. It wouldn't have been fair. I don't think I would make a difference. It wouldn't make a difference for me, but I think they would have put him in there. Yeah. That's a big what if story in Yankee history, because do they bring in Tino Martinez? But he retired early and didn't want to do that, and then he avoids that scenario.
In that line of thought, I think he'll get like a Baines. He kind of needs a champion in the room, is basically what it sounds like. Tony La Russa was that for.
He had it this year, man.
You would think. I know.
I mean, you're not going to have 14 Yankees. If you get 6, it's a good amount of people. I mean,
you got 6 of the 12 votes, or 6 of the 14 votes, and he needs 12. So
you think Mattingly has a chance to get in the future?
I think Mattingly might get 28th when they reconvene. So I think Mattingly may get in 28. As for the
I'd have to see who falls off the ballot who could also join.
Correct. Yeah. As for Bonds and Clemens, and who would join the ballot too. As for Bonds and Clemens, in 6 years,
I don't think it happens.
Yeah, in 6 years,
they're done.
Does the makeup of that committee change enough? And
I don't think so. No way.
Is it enough to get them above 5?
Here's why I don't think so.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, and this is why people were positive on maybe their chances this year, even though I didn't think it would happen. If you've noticed, and I think it's a little subtle thing, he's never going to fully apologize or admit it, even though I'm a Bonds guy, but I think he took steroids and inflated his career a little bit because of it. I don't think he'd have the single season or all-time records without it, but still would have had a great Hall of Fame career. If you've noticed, though, Major League Baseball in general, we talked about a babyface or heel turn. They're trying to force a babyface turn on to Bonds. They're putting him on Fox. They're putting him in all these things with Ken Griffey Jr. that everybody loves. They're having him laugh, and they put him there after Willie Mays died. They're having him on everybody's podcast, George. He's on MLB Network. He never used to be there for 10 years. They didn't even have him in any montage. He's getting on those shows now. He's talking with people that he knows voted against him, and he's having laugh fests on shows. That's all happening the last several years. I think people thought they're trying to soften this man. He'll get a little bit more love in the room. And what did they do in the room? They flipped them all off and basically said no. I think what's going on here, they've decided in the room, not even just the older voters, but the Hall of Famers, the former players, the Tony La Russas of the world. I think that group, for better or worse, have decided that, look, yeah, Bonds would have been a Hall of Fame player regardless. Same with Clemens. We know they took steroids. They know they took steroids. We don't believe the career would have been inflated as much as it was because of the steroids. Yeah, there are some other people from the Mitchell Report that are respected that are in, but who's thumbed their nose, who's been in the room, A-Rod's apologized and admitted it. That might help him, honestly, George. Barry Bonds to this day on show says he never touched steroids. He is lying his teeth out.
Yeah.
And I think that what they're saying in the room is, if you want to lie and you want to do it's the same thing with Pete Rose. There are people that believe, okay, he's a Hall of Fame player, hit king. He clearly deserves it, one of the greatest winners of all time, played all these positions. But there are people that keep going out there and saying, and he's since died, obviously, maybe he'll get it posthumously, that he kept lying all those years really hurt his chances and credibility. I think the way Bonds has handled this is the opposite of A-Rod and has been bad. And I think a lot of those people in those rooms are basically telling him, this is your punishment. Your bat's in there. Everyone knows the numbers. They can look up Baseball Reference. Obviously, you're still going to be in ranks of people's lists and you're on shows, but you're not in there. And what I also believe, George, and I don't know them personally, of course, but what I also believe, because I know they had their Joe Buck shows and Roger Clemens told me doesn't care, at least Bonds. I've studied him enough. I believe it bothers him. And I believe the people in the room knows it bothers them, and even though they won't admit it, and they want to stick it to him. I don't think there's any shot. I think they embarrass him and he gets 5 or 6 votes again in 2031, and then he's never in. And the only caveat I will give, because they've been softening him up so far, and this is what I would recommend him doing. I don't think this will ever happen. Tell me if you think this has ever have a chance to occur. I think he needs to study the A-Rod doctrine, and he needs to have a press conference, especially now, because he missed this. I think it now makes sense. I think he needs to hold a press conference, maybe even going into Jeff Kent's induction, because they're teammates and Sanford would do this for him. And I think he needs to admit steroid use.
Yeah.
I think he needs to literally say what was in Game of Shadows that has been reported by 18 sources, that I was already a great player. I got jealous of this. I wanted to show you what I could do on roids. Here's this. This is what A-Rod has gone as far. I'm not even exaggerating here. I've seen A-Rod on the show do this. He has gone so far to literally say that he believes he had 7 home runs per season due to steroids. He's done the calculation, for crying out loud. I would do that if I was Bonds. Now, it would take him below 73 and below the all-time mark, but I think people would like to forgive, and we're a forgiving country. If you admit something, they'll forgive. The whole plan of I never touched anything knowingly, and the only test I failed, I didn't do it knowingly, and I didn't know what my training was putting on my body, we're not that dumb. We're not that dumb. And I don't think it's working. It's not working. Now, the other issue is it's the O.J. Simpson route. When you're dug in, I mean, when you're so far dug in, like Bonds and Clemens, vehemently denies still. When you're so dug in, maybe they can't admit it. Maybe the legacy, they can't ever admit it. But do you think there's a chance that in the next 5 years that we ever get either an admission or proof, and then we can soften on Bonds? Or does he become O.J. Simpson forever and goes to his grave denying it, and they never put him in?
He just never, and you know this probably better than me, but he just never seems like a guy that cares about the contrition part of it, right?
You would think
A-Rod's done it.
You would think. Yeah.
Lance Armstrong comes to mind. Lance Armstrong did it.
We're putting him in movies again. We're better with him there, right?
And they all, they gain some semblance or sense of maybe not necessarily credibility, but like they get to have a career or whatever for a while with it. So I don't think I don't think he will, but I agree with you that if he did, it would drastically change the perception that people have around him and maybe change their voting.
Because here's what I believe. Do you think A-Rod would have his Fox job if he never admitted it? I don't know. I think if he was doing the Bonds route, they would say you're in a corner because you're going to lie. I think the fact that he is going out in Good Morning America and crying and calculating and saying I would have this, this, and this, and I made this mistake. He did a whole documentary to confess basically all his sins. I think because of that, the world wraps their arms around him. I mean, another sales pitch to Bonds. If he wanted to do a 2-part documentary in which he, in that documentary, admits steroid use, he would make so much money it'd be out of control. So, like, I just think there's still an appetite for. I mean, obviously, a younger crowd is fine with him now. But I just think that if he would admit it, he'd have an easier time. I think he's being punished in there. And I think his whole mentality is, and this is Rodgers too, because I don't know if you saw when Roger Clemens did his sit down with Joe Buck a couple years ago when he was doing those sit down with athletes. But he literally told Joe Buck that if he was called for the Hall of Fame now, he doesn't even want it. And Joe even said, Roger, don't do this. Like, don't do this. They're going to make it harder on you now. And he said, well, why should I go in? During the whole time, though, he never denied steroid use. And I'm sitting there thinking, what are we doing? Like, am I in the Twilight Zone? Like this is just not good. So I think that they're dug into this and nothing's probably going to change. The only chance that maybe you say you don't think Bonds would do it. If we were talking 3 years ago, did you ever think you'd see him sitting there with Ken Griffey Jr. laughing on a Fox post-game show? Like, he's come around a little. He's come around a little. I just think there needs to be something in the room. Like, there needs to be something. And the other option that I've always thrown out there, if I was in charge, and I am not, and Bonds, I think him saying he doesn't like this is hard too. I would put everybody, steroids or not, who would qualify, meaning your numbers are legit enough. So this would include Sosa, beyond just Bonds, who clearly was way better, in, and then I would put on the plaque, suspected, proven, failed this test, lied here, found here to Congress, Bonds hat size gained 1 billion sizes up, on the Mitchell report, Game of Shadows was written about. You could even Bonds. You could even say, okay, Game of Shadows written about and accuses steroid use on the bottom. I would put it on the plaque, but let him be in. Another problem is Bonds has publicly said, when that has been broached to him, that if they put anything mentioning that on the plaque, he doesn't want in. Okay, you're dug in. You're never going to get in then. I think he keeps digging in to it's almost like he's a little arrogant. Like, he started getting arrogant after, like I'm just going to put out all these requirements. Like, he was one of the greatest players of all time, if not the GOAT. He has no room to put out any of these requirements. He has no control of this. Like, he has no leverage to be putting out requirements of what he would demand for his Hall of Fame plaque if he wants to get in. So I don't think so either. But it is interesting that their voting total was what it is. And it also will be very, very, very interesting. Here's what will be really interesting to see how the thought process is of Bonds in the Hall of Fame. So Kent goes in. They weren't best of friends. Does Bonds find himself there as a guest? Do the Giants take him? Does he sit there? Not on the stage, but in the front row with us, like when we went to Cooperstown. Does he go to the crowd and just support his former teammate, sit there, camera will be on him, in Cooperstown? I think if the Giants want to help him, they would try to get him to go. I think getting him on the camera would be good. I think if he doesn't want to do that, or if he's interviewed there and he denies steroid use, that's all kinds of bad. But I think maybe that would be good, if getting him there as a guest. Now, maybe Jeff Kent would say, no, this guy strangled me in the dugout. F him. But like, if he's cool with it, maybe but like, I think that could be ironic to have him there supporting a former teammate. But I don't think so.
Yeah.
So
see how it plays out. A lot left to figure out baseball. And a reminder that the Baseball Writers Association of America will vote on its ballot. We'll certainly discuss and announce its results in January.
I'm sure we will discuss that. I am sure, and I can give you a quick prediction. I believe they're going to induct Andrew Jones and Carlos Beltran. Just the two of them, nobody else. Beltran was real close. I think he already should be in. I think Andrew Jones is also pushing there. I think we're also softening on him despite his end of his career. And I think the issue is going to be, even though Jones's percentage was a little closer, I think unanimously everyone wants to put Beltran in and picked up this year for him. And if you put Beltran in, Andrew Jones and Beltran's career are almost exactly the same. I think you put the two of them in together. I think at least Beltran goes in, but I think you put the two of them in together. I think they both will go in, and that'll be the class. You have the two of them with Jeff Kent. I think that'll be the class. And that's not really that horrendous. I think nobody else will get in, but I will throw out that I think Torrey Hunter's been pretty screwed in some votes. He's not getting enough votes. I mean, he has the same gold gloves as those guys, a little bit less home runs, but 400 plus still for him. I don't think he gets enough love, but I don't think he's going to get in. I think Andrew Jones and Carlos Beltran will get in, and at least one of them, but both will get in from the writers.
That will put a bow on this edition of the Howitzer and Buzz-saw Show. A reminder to find us wherever you get your podcast. Search Howitzer in your favorite podcast app to download us for free. And also a shout out to the Hyphen Podcast Group, bringing great podcasts to the people, a Morgantown, West Virginia-based podcast collective. Check them out at Hyphen Podcast Group online and on socials.
You can find us all over social at Gerbo3, at Mike Asti 11, at Howitzer Buzz-saw for the show handle. You can also, of course, find us everywhere you get your podcasts. If you can't find us, you're just not trying hard enough. And now I guess we can wish a happy holidays to you and yours. I will give you a little baby face comment as the heel of the show for that, as we now are fully into the holiday season. George gets to celebrate Christmas twice. Serbian Christmas will happen as well into the new year.
That's correct.
But Thanksgiving behind us now, the greatest holiday still, but behind us. So to you and yours, as we will get more drama and more things to talk about, and maybe we'll get to some of this NBA drama because, it's also been funky around the National Basketball Association in recent weeks, to say the very, very least. And the Clippers have managed to find a way that nobody's talking about, the whole illegal contracts and aspirations and companies that don't really exist and fake contracts to Kawhi Leonard. They managed to figure out a way to get that off the headline by ushering out Chris Paul at 3 a.m. But I'm sure we'll get into all of that as well, because he actually can't do anything until almost the Christmas holiday because of some weird rules in the whole system. So it'd be more asinine, I'm sure, until the end of the year.
This has been another edition of the Howitzer and Buzz-saw Show, where we conquer bracket reveals, the holiday season, and sports radio.
One day and one holiday at a time.